Україні, коло милої дівчини. Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптя посорбати довбані щі, та трохи в ущах перегрівся навар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Зі сходу припхались до нас барани, для восстановлення великої страни, найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Їх доводи, всяке озброєння, різне, ракети, потужні машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, і ми зачаїли на орків образу, з бандитів російських робить примар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, на вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто ж винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає їх цар.
my god. Hang on just a second, everyone. Let me try and get my Google tab back up. Let's see here. Crap, 1 second, y'all. Let me close down that one. Open up another one. Sorry about this, y'all. For some reason, Google decided to shut down on me right when I started off the stream. So let me go to Google My Maps. Let's go to Google Maps. Let's get on the most recent one. I believe this one's it. Yep, here it is. All right. So, hello, everyone. I am the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, everybody, and welcome to day 105 of the news.
And tonight, we're of course going to be reporting the day 105 news. Sadly, due to the glitch I'm having right now, let me actually open up a new tab and fling that one over there on the second monitor. I cannot see the live chat as of the moment. I don't know why it does that sometimes, but every once in a while, when the stream starts and I click my buttons to turn it on, it just shuts down all of my tabs. So with that, I won't be able to see y'all's comments for the moment, but we will be reporting on the day 105 news, and I have seen a lot of people asking in the live chat before it's shut down for me, what is going on? What government is collapsing? Is it the Russians? Is it the Ukrainians? Whose is it? The answer is it's neither the Russians nor the Ukrainians, and it's not some external Western nation, obviously. It's actually the DPR, and we're going to get to that here in just a second. But if y'all could bear with me for just exactly 1 second, let me try and pop up my control room real quick so that way I can see everyone in here, so that way I'm not leaving you all high and dry and I can't see what's going on in the chat. So let me hop over to that real quick. And it's loading, and there we go. All right. So sorry about that, everyone, but once again, welcome to the Day 105 News, and let's go over tonight's schedule, and let's see what we have in store. We're actually going to be starting off in Russia tonight. We have two interesting bits of news from inside of Russia. We'll then be moving past the location unknowns and straight into Donetsk, and we're going to be covering Donetsk in its own, I guess you could say, a little segment tonight. We did see that the government apparently has collapsed today, at least on a very sizable degree. I don't think it's going to be as serious as some can make it out to be, but it's still a very interesting development, and it's showing that there is a lot of fracturing in the power and command structure, at least within the pro-Russian states. So after we cover the Donetsk news and the Russian news, we're going to move to the location unknowns and then start our normal schedule. But we're going to take a pause and answer 3 questions from the chat before we get to the location unknowns, answer those, and then we'll go to the location unknowns. We actually have, I think, a pretty decent amount of them tonight. We have 13 of them, so that will actually be its own little segment. Yes, it will be, actually. That'll be its own segment. We'll then move on to the Kharkiv area and the northern Donbass and also the rest of the news, because there's a very small amount of it, and that will be its own section. And then we'll go to the speech from President Zelensky, and that'll wrap out the news for tonight. And so, we have quite a night ahead of ourselves. Of course, already started off with a little bit of turbulence. Hopefully we don't have any problems with that. And I also have to let y'all know that it is raining very heavily outside. It's been raining terribly for the past, I guess you could say, few hours, really. It's almost been like gale force winds. It's almost the perfect storm out there. And so if the stream does go down, I just want you all to know that's nothing on our end. We're not being hacked. It's most likely the weather outside knocking out our internet. And so with all that out of the way, all of our disclaimers, let's get straight into the news. Starting off in Russia today, we've seen 2 interesting events happen. First, we've seen more state-sponsored insanity. I always have to show y'all this because the Russians just never stop, especially on the state TV channels. And so, obviously, I'm going to have to mute this. You can hardly see the captions, most likely on y'all's end. And so I'm going to read over it and tell y'all what this guy is saying. And also to a bunch of people who may be coming in here, we will be getting to the news of the government collapsing. I want to make sure that people aren't thinking that was clickbait. It actually did collapse in a way today, and we'll be getting to that here in a minute, but we're going to cover the Russian news first. So I'm going to read over the captions at the bottom, and I'm going to explain what they're saying. So here we go. What can the British Empire respond with? The British Empire hasn't existed since the 1950s during the Suez Crisis or after the handover of Hong Kong, whichever way you want to look at it. So I don't know why he's saying that. If 2 of its subjects are shot or hanged, just wipe their face off? What can they do? They can threaten us with a 7th wave of sanctions. Is a big problem for Boris Johnson. Pirates are never executed by shooting, but we're not dealing with pirates. And these are not the Middle Ages. We don't do quartering. We don't care whether others execute by hanging. If Saddam Hussein could be hanged, so can they. But why? When can we shoot them? No, hang them. Military gets shot, criminals get hanged. No, in the USSR, not only military got shot, the death sentence was enacted in certain cases, but they've been executing by hanging since 1943. This is a prescribed procedure. In 1945, they hung them in Kiev's public square. Now, everyone's got to understand here what these people are actually doing. They're not even running a contest on this board of whether they should execute British journalists or not, which is what they're talking about. They're talking about what is the method that we're supposed to execute them with, either by hanging or by gunfire or what. And that's honestly incredibly sick when you actually hear it out of their own mouths. Of course, I'm having to read over it because the captions are, of course, split in half at the bottom of the screen. But that's honest. That's insane. This is nuts that they would sit there and actually say this stuff on Russian TV. It's not even a question of should we put them in prison for life or anything like that if they were trying to do something to them. It's how do we kill them. So with that, we're going to go back to the video. But this in 2022, DPR and LPR have their own laws. So will they shoot them or hang them? Hang them or shoot them? No, quarter them. We're in the 21st century in the center of Europe holding discussions about how to execute mercenaries. To hang them, shoot them, or quarter them. Just for those of y'all who don't know what quartering is when you pretty much cut open the center part of their lower abdomen and just pretty much pull their guts out. So that's what drawing and quartering means. So that's how barbaric the Russians are getting, is that they're actually going to pretty much advocate that maybe even some kind of form of medieval torture of an execution is used on these journalists that they're talking about. This is the new world. This is chaos. We're descending into chaos, obviously. The question about the mercenaries, to shoot them or execute them in some other way, we have plenty of time to do that. But why can't we use the current situation to offer them to Britain in exchange for Russia's frozen holdings? We know that their elites likely won't go for it. They've already shown unwillingness to compromise. But this will cause a storm in British society, particularly through the parents of these mercenaries. They'll be in every tabloid yelling about it, that they won't release the money in those accounts. Well, obviously not. I mean, hell, looking at that from my perspective, I wouldn't give up billions, well, hundreds of billions of dollars even in holdings for two men. It's not an equivalent exchange, obviously. I mean, that sounds unfortunate, but, the billions of dollars are doing much more damage to Russia than it is to Britain for the Russians to hold these two men. To save the lives of their fellow Britons, this will cause a crisis. Nah, I don't think so. No, it won't. They're not that stupid. It could cause a crisis for their establishment. And that's the end of the video, but you just saw how sick the Russians actually work in their mindsets, that they actually talk about, should we hang them, shoot them, or quarter them? Hanging, honestly, out of all of them, I would consider hanging the most humane, but still in the modern world, hanging someone, it's like, that's barbaric. Shooting, they also brought up shooting, and then they started talking about Soviet times, like that was a time of enlightenment. Oh, gosh. Anyways, I'm just going to let that be what it is. There's no point in even talking about it. Not even going to waste my breath on these people. But that's what the Russian state TV was talking about today. So with that, we're now going to be moving on to our second bit of news in Russia, where we can see that a soldier actually has admitted to torturing Ukrainians, which is another very interesting clip to watch, because this is just said plain and simple. He says they don't respond to pain, which means that they are, of course, inflicting pain and suffering on these prisoners of war, and they're noting that it's really doing nothing to them. So this one actually has captions y'all can read. So I'm just going to let this thing play and let y'all see this because it's sickening. So here's the video.
Были такие, и ты с ним, общаешься, получается, он такое ощущение, что не он у нас в плену, а мы у него в плену. Даже такое вот, он дерзкое получается, он не чувствует ни боли, ничего. Это да, это присутствует, и это...
There it was, right there. It was right near the end. Defiant behavior. He does not feel any pain or anything. And so the Ukrainians even have high morale and high spirits while in captivity. And this guy is saying that no matter how hard they try and torture them and break their spirit, It doesn't even do anything to him. But in the process of saying that and talking about how let me try and think of a right word. How resilient the Ukrainians are in their morale, he literally admits to torturing Ukrainian soldiers. And so, there's a war crime right there that goes against the Geneva Convention.
Ни боли, ничего. Это да, это присутствует, и это присутствует по всему фронту.
And he says we see it all over the front, which means that they're torturing Ukrainian prisoners across the entirety of the front, and they still keep up their high morale and their spirits aren't broken. I gotta tell you, the Russians are, golly, they're just, I mean, it's one thing to hear it in a third-person thing. It's another thing to hear it from a first-person perspective, pretty much a first-hand account, where this Russian has obviously seen Ukrainians being tortured and then just goes home and talks about it like it was just a business affair. Oh yeah, we tortured them. They didn't really respond to it. That's just sickening. Anyways, now let's get on to the news that everyone's here for tonight, down in the Donetsk region. Down in the Donetsk region, it appears that there's been a little bit of a conundrum today, and maybe a small power vacuum has been made, although it most likely will be filled incredibly soon. Now, before we go into this, I'm going to preface this with a whole bunch of stuff, because it's important to actually discuss it in a reasonable perspective. The government resigned today, the entire government fell apart. But the thing is that doesn't really mean much of anything, and here's why. The Russians have been controlling the DPR and the LPR ever since the outset in 2014. One of the original leaders of the DPR or LPR, I couldn't really remember exactly, but he started to espouse anti-Russian sentiments and said that the DPR or the LPR, whichever one he was in charge, should take its own path, and surprisingly, he committed suicide by a gunshot to the head just a little while later. A lot of people assumed he was killed by Russian special forces, which were, of course, denying that they were having any involvement in the conflict at that point. And then they had him replaced with a pro-Russian leader of one of these republics who said we should be all for Russia, we love Russia and everything about them. And so while this government has dissolved today, I feel like the Russians will be very proactive in filling those positions with yes men to the Russian government, and of course ensuring that stability is ensured to some degree. But we did get an article today saying that the DPR government dissolved after the chairman, Alexander Onachenko, resigned today from his position. The chairman of the DPR government is much like the chairman of the People's Republic of China, as in they are pretty much the leader of the country. Of course, the DPR, being a communist country, is, I guess you could say, modeled after many of the other I guess you could say, ancestors of their system. So we can actually see today that according to this report, the government has dissolved. We can see that they were dismissed due to the resignation of the chairman. And while this is a huge deal, it's going to most likely be fixed incredibly fast by the Russians. This is really nothing more than a paperwork side of things, an administrative thing for the Russians, but it is showing that apparently there are massive rifts, and this is the important underlying issue here. There's apparently massive rifts in the DPR chain of command and leadership that would have led to the chairman resigning. We don't know what those are in particular at this point, but it's showing that the Russians aren't having an easy time, even domestically and diplomatically, with their puppet I guess you could say breakaway nations. Now, to give a little bit of context historically for this kind of event, this didn't happen all too long ago in Finland, where the government was dissolved because I believe it was actually the prime minister resigned due to some problems in the government. They weren't able to enact the right policies, and so she stepped down and the entire government dissolved in that day, and then, of course, it was replaced promptly afterwards. But it does show that apparently, based on the Finnish precedent, where it was a massive policy issue that led to the government resigning, there's apparently a massive issue going on in the DPR that's not really public that's led to this problem. So, of course, we're going to keep an eye on it. We're going to see who the new chairman is, how the new government's formed, but this is massive news. Of course, this hasn't really changed much of the situation on the front line. Some of the soldiers may not even know this is going on. This may be something like, for example, what happened in Burma a while ago. If y'all remember watching the person on the fitness video doing their fitness routine, and then in the background there was a military coup going on. That could be the case. I'm not really sure. The information is somewhat foggy about what's surrounding this right now and why this happened. But we do know at this point that it certainly is underway, and the Russians are most likely going to be looking to fill those positions incredibly soon. So with that, we're now going to move out of Donetsk Well, actually, we're not going to move out to Donetsk. I have to make sure to try and keep the formatting at least stable to some degree. We're actually going to be covering the news in the Donetsk area today, and we've actually seen some interesting developments that may be showing why the Donetsk Republic is discontent with their Russian partners. And today we've actually seen that the Russians shelled swimmers near a lake in Donetsk with their own artillery. This is something new. We've, of course, seen the Russians commit, I guess you could say, friendly fire. We have seen MLRS barrages fired by the Russians landing in DPR villages, but this is something entirely new. We don't see a single military unit near the bank of this lake or river or whatever it may be, but we do see swimmers, and that is it. And you can see that they're all swimming, of course, out here on this lake, having a good time, and then all of a sudden, you're about to see something bizarre. An MLRS barrage is going to start pouring in over here on the left side of the screen, as you can see right there. And then a rocket is going to land right in front of these swimmers, not too far away from them in the water, which causes some of them to freak out and they start running. Then we see more trying to run away as well. And I don't know if those were more people out there further in the water. I'm assuming that they're not, since we didn't see them move during the whole entire video. But we can see that the Russians are even attacking DPR citizens while they're swimming at lakes. There's really no words. I don't even know where to go with this. It's literally just the video. They're attacking DPR citizens that aren't even near the front lines, and they're swimming at a lake. Like, what Russian artillerist flew a drone over this, or whatnot, and looked at this exact location and said, yes, it's the Ukrainian military swimming in this lake, let's bombard them. There's not even a military unit in sight. So you can see here more evidence, of course, of, I guess you could say, Russian war crimes and them deliberately targeting civilians. And these aren't even Ukrainian civilians, these are DPR civilians. And now they're attacking them as well. And that may be the reason why, due to multiple events like this happening that haven't made it to the light of day to the public, that the DPR government has resigned. Maybe they've decided that they can't keep on going in this puppet position and whatnot with these kinds of things going on in the background. I can't really tell you for certain. Of course, we're still waiting for more information on that, so that's an assumption. But it looks like the situation, at least politically in the DPR, has worsened. Moving on out towards the front lines near Marinka, we've actually seen DPR artillery firing at Ukrainian trenches and apparently getting a couple of direct hits. We can see that apparently the artillery has tried before, as the fields are already pockmarked with shells, but we can see today that they have tried again, and it appears that they were a little bit more successful as some of the shells did land on the Ukrainian positions. As of this moment in the video, we don't see any Ukrainian soldiers anywhere in the trench, so I'm not really sure if this is occupied or abandoned. We will, of course, try and watch the whole video as much as we can to see if there is any proof of Ukrainians being in these entrenchments. But as of the moment, while the DPR artillery is hitting the Ukrainian positions head on, we're not seeing any troops anywhere. So it's making me wonder if there are Ukrainian troops here. We now see the fourth shot land directly onto that same bunker. But still, we do not see any movement of any Ukrainian troops throughout the rest of this small little entrenchment, and we haven't seen any Ukrainian, however morbid this sounds, we haven't seen any Ukrainian bodies flying up in the air from any of these explosions, which usually we do see when the Ukrainians hit Russian units, and sometimes when we see videos, very rarely, of the Russians hitting Ukrainians. We didn't see any of that, and so I'm not sure if this was abandoned or not, but the video is what it is. I'm just going to let it speak for itself. And so we're now going to move on up towards Avdiivka, where today we've seen the DPR fire an ATGM at the Ukrainians. While we've gotten nothing but videos today of the DPR committing actions against the Ukrainians, it's not to say that the Ukrainians are losing. This is the only video evidence that we've gotten out of the area. So, you know, it just is what it is. But we currently know that there has been no frontline developments near the Donetsk region. Neither side has conducted a breakthrough of any sort, and there is no ongoing offensive. They're pretty much just exchanging large artillery volleys and every once in a while firing an ATGM at each other or getting involved in the small skirmish just to keep the front line somewhat active, but there's really no actual offensive actions being undertaken near this area. So we can see that they've now fired the ATGM, and it's traveling outwards into the distance, but we didn't actually get to see where the missile went. We can now see them reloading another missile into the launcher. We can now see them firing it again, and we can now see a plume of white smoke in the distance, and now drone footage of what appears to be the ATGM maybe hitting the Ukrainian position, although it looks like these two videos have kind of just been put together at the moment.
Ну да, в торец. Вот, туда. Это что, блиндаж, да? Ну вот, есть попадание.
That's the end of the video, and of course, we know that the Ukrainians are holding their ground and incredibly well against the DPR. They've been engaged in an artillery battle for around a month at this point, ever since the offensive had started up in the Severodonetsk area, and an offensive of equal, I guess you could say, proportion was supposed to kick off in the DPR region of Donetsk. But we've seen as the war has gone on, they weren't able to break the Ukrainian defenses, which of course are the heaviest near the DPR, and so the front line, of course, is stalled. They are still engaged in artillery battles with the Ukrainians, but it's not really amounting to much. And so with that, we have now covered the Russian news and also the Donetsk People's Republic news, and so we're now going to be moving up towards our location unknowns and covering that entire segment as its own. But before we do, we're actually going to take a quick pause and answer 3 questions from the chat, and then we're going to return right back to the news. And so with that, Matthew, what do we got?
All right. So first up on our questions tonight, we have a $20 super chat from one of our channel regulars, Kaltenberg, who says, "Good evening, Enforcer."
Good evening, and I thank you very much for the support. Of course, it's always great to hear that you're on. I don't think you're a regular super chatter, as far as I recall. But of course, it's great to have you on. I think I've seen you in the chat a couple of times. And so, of course, good evening to you as well, and thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're moving on to the next question.
And real quick, I just want to make a quick note to everybody. If you want to put a question in, you do not have to super chat. We say that quite often. Just feel free to tag either me or the Enforcer, and we will put it in our spreadsheet, and we'll try to answer it before the stream ends, but we can't guarantee we'll answer every single one because we get a ton of questions every single night. So moving on to our next super chat, we have a $20 donation from Khan Azur, who's another channel regular, who says, "Thank you for the hard work you guys put into this. Keep up the great work, and God bless Ukraine."
And I thank you very much for the support and also the kind words to our channel and also Ukraine. And I'm very glad that you do appreciate the efforts we go through. I try and put as much as possible into trying to collect this news and make sure that it's pretty accurate. And so I hope that y'all did enjoy the interesting tidbit here about the government dissolving and the DPR today. That was interesting to me. Of course, a lot of people just flow through. I think they were mostly bots, and they're like, oh, clickbait, but it's actually what's going on right now. So, of course, we'll be keeping apprised of that situation and seeing how it unfolds, but as of today, the entire government dissolved. So with that, I thank you once again for enjoying our content and also supporting our channel, and it does mean a lot to us because without the viewer support, the channel can't keep running. So I thank you once again. It does mean a lot to us. And with that, we're going to move on to the final question of this segment, and then we're going to move on to our location unknown news.
And the last one we have here is from Graham Rollins, who puts in a $20 donation and says, "Can you see it with my friend Mr. Jackson on it?"
Do you know what he means?
I'm not really sure. When I was reading it a moment ago, I was like, "Who's Mr. Jackson?"
Sadly, I don't think I can do anything with Mr. Jackson because I don't know who Mr. Jackson is. But if I could do something with Mr. Jackson, I would try to do something with Mr. Jackson. But sadly, I don't know who Mr. Jackson is. So sadly, I can't do that. But I do thank you very much for the support. As usual, it does help out our channel a great deal, and we're always very appreciative of everyone who supports our channel, because without it, I know this sounds like a broken record, but we can't run. So thank you once again for the support. And with that, that is going to be the end of this question segment. If you have sent in a super chat, do not worry. Every single one of the super chats does get answered by the end of the night, and we also answer live chat questions as well in the final question segment of the night. And so if you would like, make sure to throw in a question let's see. Oh, Matthew, he was talking about Andrew Jackson.
Oh.
That makes sense. Well, in that case, I would, since I do have a Jackson right here. And so, now that I've addressed that pretty well, if you do have a question and you want to ask it in the live chat, make sure to add Enforcer or at Enforcer Matt, so that way it highlights it for Matthew, and then he'll collect up the questions, and we'll try and answer some of them near the end of the stream. We usually answer around 3 to 5, and so go ahead and ask that question, and feel free to ask any question you have, and it may be good enough that Matthew picks it as one of the questions we answer at the end of the stream. And so, without further ado, we're going to be going on up towards the location unknowns, and of course, covering all of those as well. We have a pretty decent amount of them today, and also some pretty varied footage. Starting off, we can see some Cataravites in action, as we've seen before. So let's get that video up real quick. And we can see them walking down the road, and trying to look like they're in a firefight. You can't really tell. I mean, they are shooting into the bushes, but they're walking down the road like they're not in a firefight. So let's take a look at this video and let's see what we got. So this lets me know that they're not actually in a firefight. Let's go back and look at that for a second. So we can see them walking down the road right here. And the way they're walking down the road is the way a normal infantry unit usually travels. I guess you could say during a patrol, if you'd like to call it that. They usually have 2 columns, and one is on one side of the road, the other is on the other side of the road, and they have a pretty decent amount of spacing in between each soldier. And they're walking down this road like nothing's going on, and then you just see the guys at the front just start spraying into the bushes and not even getting fired back at. So it's making it very questionable if there's even anything out there, and they're just doing this for the vine, I guess you could call it. So they're now walking forward. They're now shooting into the bushes. We can now see them just unloading into the bushes. When you see the guys back here aren't even phased because there's actually no firefight going on. There's no return fire. They're literally just firing into the bushes for no reason. We can now see them all unloading into the bushes, but they've never even taken any fire from there in the first place, and the bushes are so thick that you don't even know if anyone's in there. They're literally just doing this for the video. And, of course, it's hilarious because the Cataravites upload this stuff like they're actually in a firefight, and I guess that there's people in Russia that are, I guess, foolish enough to believe this is an actual firefight. I've only seen videos of this type that are this fake from another group, but even they would at least every once in a while be in an actual firefight, and that's ISIS. ISIS was a group, I guess you could say, that kind of did similar videos where they fake stuff and they try and come up with fake special forces of their own and all that kind of stuff, but it was always incredibly fake. It was so fake that the music they used in a lot of their videos started to become memes and circle the internet in that fashion. And we can see that the Chechens, not the Chechens, sorry, the Kadiravites have picked up that torch and started to run with it as they produce fake video after fake video. They made tons of them in Mariupol, and we've seen that they haven't changed a single thing in their playbook, as they're now making the exact same videos now in the eastern part of the country, somewhere in the Donbass or the southern front. So with that, we're now going to be moving on to our next bit of location unknown news, where we can see Ukrainian drone dropping grenades on the Russians. Sorry, the video is taking a little bit of a while to load. Hopefully we can get it to load. Let's just click that X and then click the refresh button. Hopefully that did it. We can also see a little troll face down here. That's a nice little addition. Let's see if it's got any music. It does not. Good. Also, I wanted to say in advance, sorry for the pixels here. Hopefully we can fix this. And it looks like even on 720, it's around 240 actually. So we're going to have to mute this. Also, I'd like to note, great job of the Ukrainians and their cosmetics. It looks like they painted a little... wait a minute, that's just to put the bomblet on there. I thought they actually had painted this bomb pink. And I was like, good job. Like, that's really cool. But we can now see the bomblet on its way. We now see it explode in the middle of this intersection. We can now see a Russian running off into the other tree line. And we now see them cover the Ukrainian operator with a troll face, which is pretty funny in its own right. And we can now see him cover the other guy with a troll face. A classic, surely. We can now see them dropping another bomblet. This time it appears to be falling right onto the Russian, which we can see kind of right there. Ooh, it got him. And that's the end of the video, but we can see there that once again, the small drones carrying the small bomblets are doing a decent amount of damage to the Russians. Well, not really a decent amount, a considerable amount of damage, of course, to that single infantryman. I don't think he's going to be getting up from this long nap he's taking, but still, it's really interesting to me, honestly, to see how these grenades, well, the bomblets fall, and how accurate they are, because when you watch them fall, they don't look accurate whatsoever. You just see them kind of veering around all over the place. I mean, you kind of see it start drifting, but then it just starts falling straight towards the ground, and it hits right by the Russian infantryman somewhere in there. Very interesting video. And of course, it's great to know that the Ukrainians are using the drones to great effect, and of course, knocking out Russian units all across the line, and just individual soldiers here and there. While it's not a massive amount of damage, it of course is a massive morale, I guess you could say, decreaser, if that's a scientific term. Call me Mr. Science. But it's a huge morale decreaser, because all of the Russian soldiers that are standing around just watch this guy get leveled by a tiny bomblet that was dropped from a drone that they can hardly see and they really can't even shoot at. So with that, we're now going to be moving on to our next bit of news, where we can see that the Ukrainians got a close call again today. The caption was also pretty good. It says, "Close but no cigar." That's actually something that a lot of people that ran stalls at carnivals used to say when you were about to get a prize. One of the prizes was actually a cigar, and if you were to, like, you know, throw at like milk bottles or something like that and you missed, they would say "close but no cigar." So that's actually a really old term. So whoever put up this little caption here knows some pretty old terms. I mean, like, that's kind of ancient, but it's still been used a lot in the modern day and also in military circles. But we can see here a Ukrainian soldier running towards what appears to be a dugout in this trench, and you can see Russian artillery land nearby, and as the caption says, "Close but no cigar." Here's the video. We see another one land even closer, and the dirt starts falling into the trench. And of course, close, but no cigar. It's great to know that the Ukrainians, of course, did survive this artillery barrage, and also it's wonderful to know that we've seen so many of these kinds of videos from the Ukrainians where an artillery barrage will land right nearby, and they still manage to survive because the Russian artillery is not as dead accurate as Ukrainian artillery. And so, of course, great to see that they did manage to survive another one, and I hope that they continue on to survive the rest of the war, and that they do remain safe. Best of wishes to the brave Ukrainian defenders, because they've been in this war for 105 days now, and they haven't lost a single bit of morale or cheer the entire time. With that, we're now going to be moving on to our next bit of Location Unknown news, where we see some Russian high-tech, and I'm talking high-tech. Check this out. They have a drone. They've finally done it. They finally got a drone, and we're about to see them launch it like the Wright brothers. So let's check this out. The drone's been launched, and it's now on its way. We can now see the Russians in a control station of sorts. We can see it's probably a house that they've commandeered, and we can also see them set up with their laptops. And of course, we can see them outfitting the drone operators with the best of gear. You can see that they have the paratrooper helmets, the normal 6B23 helmets, I believe, if I got that correct. We can also see them wearing body armor for some reason inside of a house. Most likely this unit, it may be an infantry unit. I'm not going to discredit that. But at the same time, it may just be a drone unit on its own, but they've got these guys kitted to the nines, which, considering that they're running shortages of equipment, doesn't really make much sense. So we obviously know that this is most likely, if we had to make the assumption, done for the propaganda video. And we're about to see that someone made the executive decision of saying, how do we make them look even more intelligent and more on point with what they're doing? And you're about to see how they decided that. So someone in the Russian propaganda circle said, let's give this guy a stick, and let's have him point at the screen with the stick, so that way it looks really sophisticated, like these guys are intelligent and they know what they're doing, instead of just having him point at it with his finger. I mean, you know, at the same time, not really reading too much into this, this could once again just be this guy's style, pointing a stick at a laptop that's literally within hand's reach. But to me, this seems like it was done to make them look a little bit more intelligent. So you know, take that for what you will.
4-я заря, наблюдаю БТР. 18 770 91 360.
We can now see the two S-1s firing into the distance, supposedly towards the Ukrainians.
Есть попадание.
Wait a minute. Hang on. Let's go back in the video. We're a little bit smarter than the average Russian. That's a totally different tree line that they're showing. That's a totally... Oh my god. They're bad at propaganda. This is a totally different tree line. They were pointing out Ukrainians in the last bit, like, look, Ukrainians with the pencil or whatever that was. And now they're firing at it in the video, but then they cut to a whole entire different tree line where the artillery is landing. They literally just clip together multiple random clips of footage, and they're trying to peddle this as them actually hitting Ukrainian forces. And when you clip together so many bits of film like that, and they're not even the same continuity-wise, it throws in a lot of questions like, are they even hitting the Ukrainians? Because if they had to go to a whole different area of the front lines getting barraged by artillery, that lets us assume that apparently they didn't hit the Ukrainians in the last clip, and so they're showing a different one. So now we can see them looking at the artillery blast, but of course, the Russians never actually show us if there was any damage caused from that. The Ukrainians would show us at least Russians laying on the ground, or a destroyed vehicle. The Russians fly the drone about a mile away, and zoom in just a little bit while the smoke is still dissipating, and they never let you actually know what they've done. And so it's really ambiguous as to whether they hit Ukrainians or not. We can't even tell in the video, and so we're just going to say that in the light of trying to be unbiased with these videos, although of course it's a fake one, we're going to say they may have hit the Ukrainians, but we cannot confirm. So with that, we're now going to be moving on to our next bit of location unknown news, where we've seen the Russian MLRSs being destroyed by America's #1 favorite, and a favorite of most Western countries that are in the NATO alliance, the M777. Here we can, of course, see that the Ukrainians always show us what they're about to hit. We can see the grads here marked up with Z's on the hood and also the side doors, which does let us know that these are Russian grads. And we can also see a couple of other vehicles in the tree lines, along with the trench work. And I have to say, if this is a Russian trench work, they actually did one right for once. They actually made it jagged and zigzagged instead of just one long continuous line, which of course makes the shrapnel much easier to travel down and kill more people. So it looks like for once, whoever these Russians were that dug this trench, they learned a little bit. We can now see the Ukrainian M777. This is old footage. We do know that for sure. Firing at the Russian position, but this up-to-date modern footage does show that MLRS being hit and exploding, and we can also see a couple of rockets taking it upon themselves to try and take flight a little early, and we can see that they're going in almost every direction. We can, of course, see a couple of other vehicles, it appears, one right here based off of the smoke, sizzling in the tree line as well, and I'd assume that considering they were hit by an M777 and the explosions and the rocket fire that just ensued, they are well done. So with that, it's great to see that the M777s, of course, are inflicting massive damage on the Russian forces and always making sure that their artillery doesn't get too much of a break. We do know that the Russian artillery is working overtime, but whenever the Ukrainians have the ability, and they have especially gotten a little bit of an extra leg up on that ability with the M777, they try and commit counterfire attacks against the Russian artillery and destroy them. And here today, we've seen another great example of them doing just that. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see an Ukrainian Mi-8 becoming the Mi-hate, because the Russians apparently got slaughtered by this Mi-8 here on this camera. But here's the footage. I'm just going to let it speak for itself, and so here we go. With the copyrighted music playing in the background, we can see that the Mi-8 is apparently out taking a good look at some kind of Russian unit that's near this tree line. We can now see that it's fired some kind of an anti-tank missile. I can't tell you exactly what kind, but it is traveling towards the target and hit it dead on, causing some kind of a small explosion as of that moment. We now see them fire another missile that is currently traveling and on the way. And then we can see an MLRS barrage come in. It looks like, honestly, the Ukrainians are giving this unit the works. Not only has the helicopter attacked the units on the ground, but now an MLRS barrage came in and made the problem much more worse. We can now see it fire another missile. It appears to have hit some kind of BTR. And finally, we can see the camera once again looking at generally the same spot, apparently surveying the damage. We don't see it firing a missile as of yet. Actually, it looks like that missile may have been fired, and it hit another tank, and that time we had a severe detonation, which appears to have hit the ammo and caused a massive eruption. So, of course, wonderful to see, and I bet a lot of people can agree with me, that the Ukrainian attack helicopters, which are older and much more dated than the Russians, mostly comprising of older Mi-24 variants and also Mi-8s, which are usually used as transport helicopters, it's good to know that they still can be used and do have a place on the field, even with, I guess you could say, guided missiles. We've seen the Ukrainians up to this point using exclusively with the Mi-8s unguided rockets to, I guess you could say, use them as an attack helicopter of sorts. But now we've finally seen them using, I guess you could say, wire-guided missiles, most likely against Russian targets. And so it is good to know that the Ukrainians have the ability to do something like that, because up until now we hadn't seen it. So, of course, great to see, and I hope that the Ukrainians do get a large amount of progress with these Mi-8s, now that we've seen that they're using wire-guided missiles on them instead of just the usual unguided rockets. With that, we're now going to be moving on to our next bit of location unknown news, where we can see something pretty cute. Now, this is, of course, our usual obligatory break in the middle of the night, where we get to see something nice and cute. So we actually saw some baby deer lying flat. Of course, there's a little bit of a sad side to this, but it was actually explained by a in-house, apparently like a biologist, I guess you could say. Apparently, baby deer, when left by their mother, lie flat on the ground and do not move until the mother returns. And so this is apparently natural behavior by the fawns. But there is artillery going on in the background, which has led a lot of people to maybe assume that these fawns have gotten so freaked out that they're now just laying out on the ground and just sitting there because it's sensory overload for them. I'm not really sure what the answer is, but they're pretty cute, and the Ukrainians do pet them. So here's the video. They're so small. They're about the size of a corgi. I feel sorry for him.
Какой же ты, сука, конченый.
Biggest get some. I have a lot of love for fawns. Of course, everyone loves baby animals of every kind, so I love fawns. But I can tell you something. I cannot stand adult white-tailed deer. I think they're about the dumbest species of animal here in the southeastern United States, next to the normal squirrel, the common squirrel. Those things never move when a car is driving right at them, whether it's day or night. I know a lot of people say that they don't move because the headlights blind them, but come on, it's like in the middle of the day sometimes and they just stand there. Or they run straight into your car and they see it well in advance. I can't stand grown-up deer, especially the white-tailed deer here in the South. I don't know about other kinds of deer. Maybe they're more intelligent. I don't know. But golly, like, dread when those things grow up to become adult deer, because then they can inflict some damage on a car. But at the moment, of course, they're incredibly cute, and it was great to see that the Ukrainians did pet them a little bit. Hopefully they didn't shoot them and eat them, because, you know, I don't know how well their food situation is. I feel like they wouldn't do that. But of course, a cute little video about those baby fawns. With that, we're now going to be moving on to our next bit of location unknown news, where we can see some Mi-8s flying low. Once again, I said that the Ukrainians used the Mi-8s to a high degree, and I'm not lying when I say that. It seems like their entire helicopter force is made up of primarily Mi-8s, with a couple of Mi-24s mixed in. And here we can see a video of one of these Ukrainian Mi-8s almost rolling across the ground as it evacuates out of the area. Here's the video. And there's the second one. I wonder how much of an adrenaline rush it is to be in one of those helicopters and fly that low to the ground. It must feel really cool, and so I don't think a lot of pilots complain about doing that. Probably it's a huge rush for them and incredibly fun, hopefully. Usually we see them, of course, joking around, smiling and laughing when they're flying these helicopters whenever we get to see cockpit footage, and so I bet they're having a fun time. and I wish them the best of luck. I hope whatever target they just attacked or about to attack gets hit dead on by the unguided rockets, most likely. And so, with that, we're now going to be moving on to our next bit of location unknown news. Here we can see a rare Ukrainian MLRS, and when I say rare, I mean incredibly rare. Now, I would say, usually whenever I see something rare being pulled out by the Russians, I say they're getting desperate. I would say that for the Ukrainians, but they've practically been desperate from the start and fielding everything that they possibly can. We saw within the first week, they had already deployed one of their rarest prototype vehicles. They only, I believe, had about 3 of them, and one of them was rolling around Kharkiv. So the Ukrainians, of course, and it's an understandable position for them, they don't have as much equipment as the Russians, and so they've been pulling out the stops on everything, regardless of how rare it is, since the very onset of the war. And here we can see a very interesting rare find here. This is actually a Uragan system that's been put onto, let me try and make sure I get the name of this right, a Tatra chassis. I believe Tatras, if I got this correct, let me pull that up. Tatra is a Ukrainian vehicle manufacturer, Czech vehicle manufacturer. And so we can actually see a couple of vehicles they make here. Let's take a look at them. All right, pretty cool car. I know that's an old one. Pretty cool, though, gotta say. I'm a big fan of that. We can also see one of the Tatra fuel trucks here. Honestly, they look a lot like Oshkosh's, at least that model does. But apparently they're very famous for the Tatra T87. I'm not going to lie. That's not a bad looking old car if you were to go with an old European one. Let's see what else they produce. I'm not going to stay on this too long, but I do want to know a little bit about what they've made. Apparently the T87 is just all the craze with Tatra. We can also see that apparently they make some pretty nice semi-trucks. Which is, of course, neat to know. And I'm a big fan of European trucks. They look neat. Anyways, getting back to the actual video, we can see that they've mounted the Uragan, I guess you could say, MLRS system onto the back of this Tatra truck. And it's also been equipped with some of the most up-to-date fire control systems, as it has a fire control computer on board. So let's mute this and see this thing roll out. And yes, to me, I don't play SnowRunner, sadly. But we can see the Uragan MLRS system on the back of this Tatra, and we can see them rolling it out, and it does not have a tight turn circle. If you're needing to parallel park in this thing, I would generally suggest not to. It appears to have a very wide turning radius, similar to a Ford F-150, but even at that, I'm not going to say that it's as wide a turning radius as the Ford F-150. That thing literally takes a country mile to turn. And I have to say, the cab on this thing is incredibly cool. I don't know if modern military companies actually design stuff to look cool, but the way they installed these windows onto the side doors of the cab is just really cool. I have to say, if anything could be taken from this video, it's the cool factor of this MLRS. Also, the turning radius is incredibly poor, so with that, it's interesting to see. I hope this thing gets used incredibly well, and hopefully the fire control computer actually helps it to get a little bit of increased range, or if it can't get increased range, hopefully much improved accuracy with the fire control system. So with that, that's the end of that video. Of course, really interesting to see. And also another interesting thing that I was looking at today, speaking of cool and modern military systems, is that a lot of people, of course, are always talking about the Americans sending over the M1 Abrams. But something I was thinking, although I don't think the French would do this because they did stop production of this vehicle in 2007, is the French or the British sending over either the Leclerc or the Challenger. Now, the British have an incredibly small amount of Challengers, the Challenger MBT, not the Challenger Hellcat, geez. But the Challenger 2 is a pretty competent tank. Only 2 of these have been lost in service, and I believe both of them were lost to friendly fire. And so, pretty much, they have an undefeated track record at the moment. At least the Challenger 2 does. About 500 Abrams have been lost, and so while it's a decent tank, it's not the best out there in terms of protection. It can be destroyed. The Leclerc, not Charles Leclerc, the F1 driver, the Leclerc MBT, is also a pretty competent tank as well. This doesn't really have too much of a service life to speak of, or it's been proven in combat, but they are competent main battle tanks. We can actually see that the French have a really cool naming system. I'm not getting into too much of an aside here, but they actually name some of their tanks after major battles that the French have had throughout their history, like Austerlitz, Leipzig, Valmy, and others. And so it's really cool to see that this one actually has Valmy on it, 1792, that these French main battle tanks do pay homage to some of the French victories of the past. But of course, incredibly good tanks, I guess you could say, in the modern aspect. Most Western tanks are very competent compared to their Eastern counterparts. And so while a lot of people are saying that the U.S. should send M1 Abrams over, which we have a readily available supply of older ones we can send over, maybe the French or the British could step up and send over a few examples. And when I say a few, I mean like less than 10 of both the Challenger and the Leclerc if they decided that it wasn't going to be sending over something that I guess you could say is too top secret or has too much classified information in it that could compromise national security. So just want to go into that aside here for a minute, speaking of modern up-to-date tech. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on to our next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see stolen TVs in a trench. Now, it's no joke that the Russians literally carry around their stolen loot. We've seen them carrying around washing machines before to the trenches, and now we can see that they brought flat-screen TVs to a trench. There's one of them.
Бежал. Ну, мы оказались немного интереснее этого петуха.
When you see another one right there, and the video ends there, showing you that the Russians literally were carrying around little, I guess you could say, computer or TV screens. I mean, like, honestly, they're about big enough to be a monitor. But they were carrying them around to the trenches when they had no use for them. It's honestly insane to me to think that they literally are so, I guess you could say, greedy that they'll steal something and then just carry it around and they can't even use it. It just doesn't make any sense. You wouldn't see this kind of stuff in any Western military like the U.S. military. You can get in massive amounts of trouble for trying to ship really anything home rather than patches, and I believe they've even cracked down on patches at this point from last I've heard, but I may be wrong with that. I'm not going to say that as certainty. So with that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see something incredibly interesting. And this was something that actually was very interesting to me. For the first time ever, we've actually seen the Ukrainians have captured a Sturm S. A lot of y'all may be saying, what is this? This looks like an MTLB. We've actually showed these things on stream before a couple of times and how they work, and they're an incredibly interesting anti-tank system. But just to basically explain, this is an MTLB armored personnel carrier, but in the back it has a massive revolving cylinder of anti-tank missiles, and it has an arm that reaches down into the tank, grabs one of these anti-tank missiles, and then lifts it up back out of the tank, and then the crew operates this anti-tank missile launcher from inside the vehicle, and so pretty much it's a modern-day version of a tank destroyer. The Ukrainians apparently have captured one. I don't know how it got that close to the front lines for it to be captured. Apparently it was most likely abandoned and then left for a while, and the Ukrainians eventually got to it. But I gotta say, this is an interesting find, and I hope that the Ukrainians do use this thing, because while a Sturm S, which is also the ATGM that this vehicle fires, is not the strongest ATGM out there, it is still, of course, effective against APCs and other lighter vehicles. And so, of course, a great capture by the Ukrainians, and we can see them all here posing with their trophy. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see something that a lot of people don't really know. We knew that a large amount of T-90s had been destroyed at the start of the war. What we have never seen at this point is the Ukrainians using T-90s on the front lines that they've captured. But apparently, they are in the process of doing that, and we will see these arrive on the front lines soon. Trademark. We can see here 2 T-90As that the Ukrainians have managed to capture, sitting inside of some kind of tractor factory. Of course, the location is unknown, and even if we did know it, we wouldn't disclose it. But we can see here that apparently they are repairing them, and they're getting them ready to be used in Ukrainian service. And so while the T-90 has, of course, been proven to be rather weak, and it can't really stand up against, say, a Javelin, it's still, of course, a pretty decent tank for what Ukraine has. Ukraine, of course, uses the same tanks by and large that the Russians use, and so hopefully they can get these things back into service and be pushing them, pushing the Russians back with their own tanks, and of course what the Russians tout as high-tech and modern. So incredible to see. We can also see a couple of things that are interesting. For example, these don't have the protective packages that are supposed to be touted on every Russian tank. It appears that they're missing them, and so with that, a great find, and of course a great capture by the Ukrainians. And hopefully we'll see these on the front line in operation soon. And hopefully I can show you all a video of that. With that, we're now moving on to our last bit of Location Unknown news here in this segment. we've actually gotten today something that a lot of people have been asking for, and that's the count of Russian losses. And so, without further ado, here are the Russian losses. We've seen that on day 105, of course, this is the infographic that I like to go to because it shows everything in a very explanatory way, I guess you could say. But we've seen that today, the Russians have lost one more helicopter, 140 soldiers, and I do have to say that that number has decreased. It used to be normal to see around 300 soldiers killed per day. The number has now gone down to 140, and I believe that can largely be explained because almost the entirety of the front lines have become static, except for the area around Severodonetsk, Liman, and also Popasna. So beyond that, there's really no action going on for them to incur losses. But in that small area, and when I say small, I mean incredibly small. We're actually going to go down there and take a look at this. Well, actually, no, we're going to zoom out to get the whole entire perspective. The Russians used to be fighting from Kyiv to Mykolaiv, and each day they'd be losing around 300, 400 soldiers a day. Now we can see that they are not fighting in anywhere in the country except for this one spot right here, and they're still managing to lose around 140 soldiers a day. And when you really think about how many soldiers that's being lost in that one small area, that gives you an incredibly good idea that the Russians are still apparently not doing well, and any gains they make are incurred with heavy losses. We also seen that they've taken out 3 additional tanks today. Of course, that number is lower as well, just like the personnel number. Usually it was around 9 to 10 tanks a day. Now it's going down to 3. Still, the Ukrainians are racking up a significant toll on the Russian tanks, as we see that they're about to reach 1,400 tanks destroyed here within the next couple of days. We can also see that 13 armored personnel vehicles, I believe that also includes BMP-2s and Tiger armored cars in one large group, they've lost 3,429 of those vehicles, with an additional 13 of them being lost today. They've also lost an additional 6 MLRSs, bringing that number up to 213. One additional supply truck. Now, that is probably the smallest amount of losses of supply trucks we've seen during the course of the war. Hopefully they can pick those numbers up tomorrow, but we've already seen that the Ukrainians have nearly wiped out at least 60, if not getting close to 70% of Russia's initial logistical forces that they entered the war with, and those logistical forces were calculated off of if they took literally all of the supply units around the Russian Federation and brought them to Ukraine for this offensive. And so they have lost such an amount of logistics vehicles that I would assume that a large amount of the supply convoys are made up of civilian vehicles at this point that they've commandeered. We've also seen them destroy 9 additional towed artillery pieces today. Pretty decent number. That's actually fairly high compared to everything else. And we've also seen them shoot down an additional 6 drones today, bringing that number up to 560 nearly. Of course, we haven't seen them shoot down any more cruise missiles, which are pretty hard to shoot down. I believe that actually says Krylati Raketi in Ukrainian. I can actually read Cyrillic a little bit. Of course, it's going to be a butchered pronunciation, but I actually tried to learn how to speak Russian a very long time ago, along with a million other languages. I've tried Welsh, Scots Gaelic, Latin, Russian, Spanish. I've tried them all, so I know a little bit about each of them, and also a lot about the Cyrillic alphabet because I just find it interesting. So I can actually read it a little bit, but I actually don't know what a lot of the words mean and what their origins are. But still, a decent amount of losses incurred today, considering that the Russians are only active in the Severodonetsk, Liman, and Popasna area, and so I hope that these losses do continue and do climb here in the future. We don't have any evidence of the Russians planning on any more offensives soon, anywhere outside of Severodonetsk, and so I believe that that number, being honest, will most likely remain in that area because the Russians aren't really going to be committing any more actions anywhere else in the country to be incurring more casualties. And so with that, we've now reached the end of our location unknown segment, and so before we move on to the Kharkiv area, the northern Donbass, and also the rest of the southern front and the remainder of the news around the country before we get to President Zelensky's speech, we're once again going to answer 3 questions from the chat, and after we do that, we're then going to continue on through the rest of the news for the night, and then get to President Zelensky's speech. And so with that, what do we have, Matthew?
All right. And before we move to the questions, I just want to address real quick a poll that I put up 3 minutes ago. And I asked you all, which vehicle would you want in a war? Your options were a Humvee, a Tatra truck, that Sherp off-road thing, I forgot the name of it, and then an MRAP. And it looks like most of you would have an MRAP in a war, which is kind of surprising. Not many of you wanted the Tatra truck, probably because of the turning radius. And it looks like if it wasn't an MRAP, it looks like most people would go with a Humvee.
Well, Matthew, I think that was kind of rigged because obviously everyone's going to go for the armored car, over like a freaking semi truck. But I mean, like,
True.
but still, it's interesting. It's actually interesting to me that 27% of y'all picked the Humvee over the MRAP, although the MRAP was made to replace the Humvee because the Humvee was so susceptible to just being lit up and getting everyone killed. So that's actually really interesting to me, that a lot of y'all picked the Humvee. Of course, there's a lot of people who stick to their guns with the Humvee, and I can't lie, it's a really cool looking vehicle. But being used in combat, really questionable to me. It's like using a Land Rover. And we saw the British also replace their Land Rovers with, I believe, more armored vehicles very similar to MRAPs, although I forgot the name. So with that, a very interesting poll. But without further ado, let's get right into that question segment. And I'm also going to end that poll real quick, Matthew. And while you read off that first question, I'm actually going to create a poll of my own because I actually have a question I'd like to ask him. So with that, let's get to the first question of this segment.
All right. And the first super chat of this segment goes to Kaltenberg, who is also a longtime channel viewer. And this is their second super chat of the night. And they put in a $20 one this time. They say, "Go Bama."
Well, I thank you very much for the support. Sadly, I can't get political. Of course, the whole entire football thing here in Alabama is a heavily contended topic. You have Tennessee, Alabama, Auburn, and then a few people who go for LSU. And so I don't really watch a lot of sports. I do wish you the best of luck, though, but I don't ever want to weigh in on sports because that will literally cause a hellfire here in these comments. But I do thank you so much for the support. It's always greatly appreciated, and it always helps us to run our channel. And so thank you once again so much for the massive amount of support. And with that being said, we are on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $17 super chat from the old grumpy one who says, "Thanks for all the hours of time you put in while I watch from my taxi at work. Finally, I'm homesick and can give something for yours and Matt's time."
Well, thank you so much for the support. When he said homesick, Matthew, did he mean he was from Ukraine?
Uh, Finally, I'm homesick. I think he might have meant like actually like he's at home sick.
Oh, well, he said he was watching it at work in his taxi, didn't he?
He did. He did.
All right, so I don't know what's going on there, and Matthew's confused me now. Let me try and see if I can find that one. I can't. But I do thank you very much for the support, and I'm glad that you do enjoy this channel a lot and that you do want to support it. It of course means a lot to us, and I keep on saying the same thing over and over, but I can't think of anything better to say. But y'all don't know how much the support means to us because it actually does keep the channel running. And we're always greatly appreciative of everyone who supports the channel and wants us to keep doing what we're doing. While college has started again for me, and so I do have to contend with that in the background and try and, of course, keep up with school and grades and such, I am trying to think about finally making a video that's not exactly about the Ukraine war and trying to branch this channel out into other things so that way it can just generally become a news and information channel and maybe even a history channel as well. I mean, like, honestly, if I had to have a massive goal for this channel, it would cover both news, historical topics, current events, and then just topical things that pertain to the real world. And so I'm wanting to do that in the future if the channel does continue to grow. It's just that that's so much stuff to do that I most likely have to start compiling a team of people to try and start working on different projects and just oversee the stuff. But it is something I want to do. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. Once again, it means a lot to us, and I thank you once again. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the last question of this segment, and then we're going to return back to the news and continue on to the speech from President Zelensky.
And the last one of this segment goes to William Allen, who is a longtime channel viewer and supporter, who puts in a $20 donation and says, "And then there's Texas A&M, 41-38. Woo!"
Well, I thank you very much for the support, William. Of course, is a football game going on right now, Matthew?
I'm not really sure. I don't follow football that closely.
I don't either, but I do thank you very much for the support, William. And also, whoop! Unfortunately, I don't weigh in on politics there because then all of the people who are not Texas A&M people will come and kill me at the stake. They'll sit there and be like those Russian news reporters in Russia, being like, "Should we hang them, shoot them, or draw and quarter them?" So with that, I thank you so much for the support, William. And with that, that's the end of this question segment. If you have thrown in the super chat, do not fret. We do get to all of them by the end of the night and answer every single one of them. We also answer questions from the live chat as well. And so if you would like to ask a question in the live chat, make sure to @Enforcer or @Enforcer Matt, and then Matthew can look at all the questions and he'll compile them all, and then some of them will be answered at the end of the stream. So you could be one of those lucky people. So with that, we're now going to return back to the news in the Kharkiv region, and while we have gotten no reports from the front line today, we have gotten unfortunate news from in the city of Kharkiv. Today we've seen that a missile hit a supermarket in Kyiv. The Russians claim that they hit a weapons factory, but we can clearly see here on this footage that this is the inside of a mall, and this missile hit it dead on. We can now see another perspective from another camera. And then moving on to the next video, which is also pertaining to the same supermarket, we can see an exterior view later on in the day of the exact same shopping center, which was hit dead on by this missile. And so here's the video of that. And you can see that the entire right side of this mall has been destroyed by the missile. Of course, the Russians claim, as they always do, that they're hitting military infrastructure, but as we can clearly see by the blasted out hole in this mall, there's no military infrastructure to be seen. And also in the other two security cameras we saw from inside the building, there is no military infrastructure to speak of. It is literally a mall. And once again, they've gone out of their way to attack civilian infrastructure just to do it, pretty much, and then claim that it was some kind of military target and they were justified in doing it. So once again, another sick example of the Russians targeting civilians and then trying to lie about why they did it. With that, moving on up into the northern Kharkiv salient, of course, we've heard no information today. It seems that the front line has largely fallen silent here, and so I believe we're not going to be hearing anything here for a while. Moving on down past the Donetsk reservoir and towards Balaklia, however, we have gotten a small amount of an update of news, and of course, the 93rd Brigade does not disappoint. Today we've seen pictures of a destroyed T-80 and a BMP-2 here in this tweet, of course credited to the 93rd Brigade. Here we can see the flipped over turret of this T-80. It appears to have been a T-80 BVM, which is one of Russia's most up-to-date. That actually may be a T-80U. It says T-80U over here, but based off of those armor tiles, it kind of looks like a T-80 BVM to me. But still, we can see that it's a flipped over turret of a T-80 BVM that they have knocked out. It appears to have burned out for the large part, and now rests in the field, a monument to Russia's stupidity. In this next picture, we can then see a flag of Russia that's apparently from somewhere of these two vehicles that has just drifted over here and fallen to the ground, and of course reflects heavily on the state of the Russian military at this point, pretty much tramped into the ground, dirty and soiled off of the image that they've gotten in this war. And finally, in this last picture, we can see what appears to be an RPG-7 that's stuck in the ground, and then the rear of a BMP-2 that's been destroyed. And we can also see that apparently it was detracked in either the explosion or leading up to the explosion. So, of course, impressive to see, and it's always wonderful to know that even in the quieter areas of the front, for example near Balaklia, where really no action has been committed for an incredibly long while, the Ukrainians are still inflicting casualties on the Russian units and don't let them have a break. So we do know that, at least in that picture, some of the losses that the Russians are taking are outside of the Severodonetsk area, but those amounts of losses are small compared to what they're actually taking in Severodonetsk. With that, we're now going to move down towards the Izium area, where we've actually gotten no reports of news there as well. It seems like the front has largely fallen silent. And once again, just to recap to some of the new viewers who are here as to why this front has fallen silent, the original plan of the Russians was apparently to push out of Popasna towards Bakhmut, take Bakhmut, and then race towards Slovyansk, and also have another spearhead stretching out from Izium down the M03 to Slovyansk, which would have created a large encirclement where the Ukrainians would have lost around 40,000 troops, and they really would have had no control over the situation. We know, however, that once this offensive began out of Izium and also Popasna, the Russians made almost no progress. They were stopped dead in their tracks at Popasna for about 2 weeks, and they were also stopped dead at Izium ever since the very start of the offensive. And so in that regard, this spearhead failed. And so it's a very interesting note to me because at one point this had a lot of potential. If they were able to race down Slavyansk, they would have caused a massive headache and a massive problem for the Ukrainian forces that would have been stuck on the other side of the M03 with really no way out. But we never saw that happen. And we've seen that the Russians have pretty much abandoned it now, and they've now put all of their eggs into the Lehman basket as they're now trying to fight from that area towards Slavyansk instead and create a smaller encirclement that would just encompass Severodonetsk and the surrounding area on its own. But we can even see there that they've fallen flat and that the Ukrainians have set up pretty decent defensive positions that have now stopped the Russians dead. But moving on back to the Izium area, we can see today that the 95th Brigade, which is in the area of Izium, launched a drone. Here's the video of that. We can now see them with the drone. It appears to be a DJI, and they've strapped a little bomblet to it. The DJI is now taking off. You know what throws me off about this guy? Is that he looks like a kid, but he's got a full-grown beard under that chin strap. That throws me off. But anyways, great to see that the 95th, of course, is using a DJI. Well, not really a DJI in particular, but using a drone with a bomblet. And I hope that they do have a massive amount of success. And also, based off of that footage, you can finally get an idea of how small these bomblets really are that they're dropping on the Russians. They're so small that you really can't see them until they're right up on you. Of course, that's usually with most bombs. You never really see them until they're right on you. But still, it's impressive to see how small these little bomblets actually are. So with that, we're now going to be moving out of the Izium area. Of course, there's nothing else to report. And also, we're going to take a quick mention of the poll real quick that we threw up. A lot of y'all have voted, and a lot of y'all have answered. 66% of y'all, the overwhelming majority, said that the M1A2 Abrams would do the best if given to Ukraine. 3% of y'all actually said the Leclerc would do pretty good, which is interesting. I don't think a lot of people know about the Leclerc. Obviously, the French aren't known for their tanks, but apparently not a lot of people have confidence in the Leclerc. 10% of y'all said the Challenger would do pretty well. Pretty good opinion. And also, 21% of y'all said the Leopard 2A6 would do incredibly well. Honestly, I don't have a bias against any of them. They all do fairly well based off of the doctrine they were made for. But we, of course, have never really seen the Leclerc proven in battle. And so that is a strike against it. We've seen the other tanks, at least in some degree, prove themselves on the front, but we've never seen the Leclerc. And so we're actually going to end that poll and free it up for Matthew to throw out the polls he likes, because Matthew throws out some pretty decent polls. So with that, we're now going to return back to the news. Near the Lehman area, which of course has fallen into static positions in the stalemate by and large, we've seen that an MTLB was hit by Ukrainian forces today in none other but a drone attack, which is actually a little bit of a change. We're going to pop over to Twitter real quick as well to show this video so it doesn't black out on us. So here's the footage. We can see the MTLB there at the very beginning of the video, detracked and derelict, and it seems that in the Russians' haste, they had to push a lot of the garbage out of the way to try and get out of the back of the vehicle.
Yo!
We can now see them hitting the MTLB. We can actually see there that it was burning at some point. It didn't look like that in the first picture. Apparently it was already detracked, I'm assuming. Let's see if we can go back in the video and find out. It may have been.
Yo!
But then the artillery hit it dead on and finished it off, even if it was sitting there just abandoned. And so the Ukrainians, of course, destroyed another MTLB, and it's great to know that they did. And there we can see the original condition of it, the before and after. Russian soldiers hate him. See how he makes the Russians lose one APC with one simple trick. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the Lehman area, and we're now going to be moving into Severodonetsk, where we've seen a small amount of news, not as much as normal, but a decent amount of news that is painting a little bit of a picture. While the Ukrainians were being met with success earlier, about a few days ago, it appears that by and large, the city is now in a pitched battle, and the results are inconclusive. It seems that the Ukrainians did get pushed back a little bit in the city a while ago, but as of right now, there's not really any gains or losses on either side. Here in this video, we can actually see Russian artillery used in the industrial area today as this pitched battle still ensues. We can see some soldiers coming out of the right side of the camera and starting to move into view of the camera in the center. I'm not really sure if this is a camera operated by the Ukrainians or the Russians. But we can see them having a discussion. And now walking across the street to the other destroyed vehicle on the other side. We can now see them discussing something again. And now moving on once more. We can now see the group split up into two separate groups. One group went to the left, and one group's going down the road. Now we can see artillery barrages coming in and hitting incredibly close. Actually, right on them. I can't really tell you if any of them survived. It looks like the barrage was right on top of them. So I'm assuming that there may be some unfortunate casualties that were incurred during this barrage. Of course, it is war, and so losses will be made. And, of course, I hope that everyone does honor these soldiers for their sacrifice that they've made in defense of their country. They knew that this could happen to them, and they still stepped up to the occasion and even rose to it. So, of course, great soldiers, by and large, doing their duty up until the very end, even if they were lost. Hopefully none of them were. Hopefully they were just injured at worst and could get some medical assistance and maybe be discharged from the military honorably later on. And so with that, we're now going to move to our next video from the Severodonetsk area, where we can see foreign volunteers fighting in Severodonetsk. Now, I just want everyone to note, there is foul language in this video. I know that I don't really cuss at all or much on stream, but there is some foul language in here. And so if you were looking for a stream without foul language, this is going to be the one moment where there is an exception. And so here is the video.
Hit that son of a bitch. All set, motherfucker. In long way, switch. Where'd it hit? There it is.
We can see him preparing to fire.
This thing is hard to aim through.
Now, this guy's saying it's hard to aim through. I'm assuming that he's not familiar with the system, and I don't know what kind of anti-tank weapon this is. It almost appears to be a bazooka, but I'm not going to say it's a bazooka, obviously. But still, I mean, like, this thing looks ancient. We heard that there was an in-law, apparently, beside the guy that also fired at the vehicle, but we didn't see that one on film.
Potential hit! Potential hit! Potential hit! Potential hit! Fire the ball! Fire the ball! Same spot! Same spot! What do you mean it's fucking... Same spot! Go! It's not fucking...
Now go and get the other.
When you see that apparently he was struggling with this anti-tank weapon, apparently it wasn't firing for a second. We could hear him voice his frustration with that, and then it finally fired, and it may have...
Fuck you, pussy!
I'm assuming, based off of what he said at the very end there, it did hit the tank and apparently caused a decent amount of damage. We can also see the in-law that was just fired right there to the left side of the screen, which does confirm that this vehicle was both hit by an in-law and that ancient relic of whatever that guy was using. And so, hopefully they knocked out the tank. I'm assuming hitting it with two anti-tank weapons they most likely did, but I'm not really sure. We didn't see it on film. But of course, it's great to see that the foreign volunteers are in Ukraine and fighting incredibly hard alongside the Ukrainian soldiers to defend their land as best as possible. We know that there are currently 2 foreign legions. I don't feel like this is giving away too much information because obviously I'm pinpointing them to Severodonetsk. There's a foreign legion both in Kharkiv and Severodonetsk at the moment. They've actually split them in 2, and so there's a fighting contingent up here near the salient, and there's also a fighting contingent down here in the city that's been fighting with the Ukrainians. We're now going to go over the river towards Lysychansk, where we can actually see that the Georgian Legion, which is also near Severodonetsk, thanked the public for their support in buying them new bulletproof vests. Apparently they got enough funds to get 92 bulletproof vests for their soldiers. So I'm going to keep this unmuted as long as possible. There is some music playing in the background, and hopefully YouTube doesn't come down here and revoke my living privileges. And so with that, here's the video.
Михаил Эльдарович, Терашвили, Руставый.
Зауташвили, Руставый. Дьявол Лен, видишь.
Итак, Сахель Гуари, Зура Бедушвили, Тбилис. Сахель Гуари.
Now I'm going to have to mute the video because the music's getting pretty loud. I'm sure I'm about to get a copyright strike over email in a second. But YouTube, while this video goes on, and they of course thank everyone for getting them these bulletproof vests. I always have to explain every once in a while because some people say, you know, like the copyrights don't matter. YouTube isn't going to apply them to you. They do, and I have tried to appeal them, and they don't get appealed. So I have to be very careful about this stuff because YouTube, of course, is a private company, and they can really do whatever they want. But here we can see all of the Georgian volunteers, of course, happy to get their new bulletproof vests. And it's wonderful to know that people out there like us who have been supporting nonprofits in Ukraine are able to raise actual support that means a difference in this war, much like the support we've been doing on these Sunday fundraisers for an incredibly long while. We can now see him talking to a Ukrainian soldier and having a discussion and then walking off. And when I say Ukrainian soldiers, they're all Georgian volunteers, but I kind of just call them Ukrainian because, of course, they're volunteers in the Ukrainian military. We can also see someone wearing a saw mask. Do you want to play a little game? You know, I would actually like to see this guy wearing that mask when he fires a javelin at a Russian tank. And, you know, the game is try and survive or something like that. Honestly, I think it would be hilarious if he rode a little tricycle into the battlefield holding like a PKP or something like that. But anyways, getting past the jokes, this is actually pretty funny to me. And it, of course, does show that they have high morale and they are joking around a pretty good deal. So with that, that's the end of the video, and it's great to know the support from the outside world, like us, is getting to Ukraine and, of course, supporting the people who need it the most. And so, great to see that these Georgian volunteers have gotten bulletproof vests off of donations from the public, and it's great to know because they will be able to continue on the fight with more confidence knowing that at least the center part of their body is well protected against enemy fire. With that, we're now going to be moving down towards the village of Bila Ora, where today we can see that a Russian helicopter attack was observed. We're going to move to Twitter real quick to check this out. And here's the video.
Дві штуки, он дві бачу. Єбать підараси, сука. Диви.
We can now see the helicopters in the distance, and we can hear what may be an AA gun firing on these helicopters, although, and it could also be the helicopters firing at them.
Це на нас. Сейчас випусти! Єбать! Урфи! Это все.
We now hear the Ukrainian soldier yelling and running. I'm not really sure what for. I don't know if the helicopter's trying to attack them directly or what.
Опять іде на нас! Все, ушла. Фу, слава Богу, блядь. Ну и...
And that's the end of that video. We couldn't really tell much about it, but we could see Russian helicopters in action and Ukrainian forces observing them. I've also seen a lot of people asking, what government collapsed? I think y'all joined late in the stream, and y'all are saying that there is no proof, but you can find the proof that I found, that I sourced that statement off of, if you go and click on the link in the description below to the Day 105 map. I have this exact same map in the link in the description below. All you have to do is click on the link and you can go straight to this marker and click on it and read about the government pretty much resigning by and large. So go check that out for yourselves. That's where I got the information from. And so I hope that helps out a lot of people who have been saying the government isn't collapsing, and it did. The government dissolved today because the chairman resigned. So just go check that out and read it for yourselves, and you'll find the information right there. Moving on down past Bila Ora and more towards the village of Erske, we've seen that the LPR has had a little bit of an artillery dysfunction. And that's putting it lightly, as a D-20 exploded today in their faces. And we can see the mangled remains of this thing after its pathetic failure. We can actually see that the artillery was in dug-in positions, this one much more shallow than the others, it seems. We can also see that they had a decent amount of artillery shells just sitting right behind the gun, which is of course standard practice, but when one explodes, it kind of puts it into perspective how dangerous that kind of is. But we can see the muzzle brake here lying on the ground, of course the shredded remains of this D-20 sitting there disappointed like. I think they might try and look into Viagra, maybe? I think that might help out with this problem. But anyways, another, well, not even another. This is actually the first D-20 that we've seen explode on itself today at all, or during the entire war. And so it's a very interesting thing to see. Also, another thing, since a lot of people don't look in the description of this video, I actually put in the description everything about this video, about these streams that will be important. So I lay out some of the important talking points for the night, and I also put in a link to the Discord, which y'all can join, and I also put in a link every single night to an up-to-date map that I'm using on stream. So I just want to let all of y'all know, just a PSA, just in case if some people did not know. And with that, we're now going to move down to the Popasna Finger. Today we've gotten no news from the Popasna Finger today, which may be showing that this is starting to fall static. We know that the Russians, of course, were trying to reach the T-1302 and also push towards down Bakhmut at the same time, but it appears that they failed at both of those objectives, and this finger has fallen silent today. So we unfortunately have no news to show what kind of progress the Russians or the Ukrainians are making. Right now, the front line is stable. We're now going to move into Luhansk itself, where we can see that the Ukrainians destroyed an ammunition stowage today. Going to hop over to Twitter real quick to show this off. And we're now going to mute it. Now we're going to put it up here. We can now see the ammunition storage that we're talking about in particular, and we can see two vehicles that were inside of it. We can now see the Ukrainian artillery, of course, being laid on heavily. Usually they say heavily apply Ukrainian artillery, and it appears that the Ukrainians take that seriously, as they are now bombarding the ammunition storage incredibly well. We can now see them hit the specific building that the vehicles were in, and we can also see some thick black smoke coming out of one of the buildings, suggesting that there is a fire and an ammunition explosion may occur soon. If we see a large explosion, we'll know that someone ate Taco Bell. We can see a smaller artillery explosion to the side near that garage that it appeared that some of the Russian vehicles were in. And we see that the fire is still raging. It appears to be getting a little bit stronger now, but we haven't seen a large artillery explosion yet. But we can see them fast forwarding the video now, because of course the Ukrainians never fail us. The Russians would have cut it off right at the beginning when the first shell hit, and that's like, look, we got them, and they would have never shown us any proof of it actually being destroyed. But of course, huge credit to the Ukrainians who take the time and the effort in the middle of a war to verify that they are in fact destroying Russian equipment and Russian supplies. We can now see that it's being hit by more artillery, but we still haven't seen one of those critical ammunition explosions that usually indicates that there was a large amount of ammunition in there. We're just waiting for the massive fireball. I'm not sure if it's actually going to happen, but we do know that they wiped out two vehicles. They did hit that garage dead on, and there is a large fire engulfing the building beside it. So I'm not sure if there was ammunition in there. They may have hit those two vehicles, which is what they're saying the ammunition was stored, and we did see some small explosions come from this building after the artillery was fired, but we haven't seen any explosions come from the building on the right. And so I'm assuming that if this was an ammunition storage, it was a smaller one, but still, destroying any amount of supplies is better than destroying none, and so it is good to see that the Ukrainians were able to knock out two vehicles and maybe a small amount of ammunition. So with that, we're now going to be moving on down the front lines, and now we're moving on into the Donetsk region again. Of course, we'll be bypassing this. We covered this early on in the stream, and we also covered which government's collapsing. And so if you got here and you don't know which government's collapsing or what, just go back to the very beginning of the video. The DPR government dissolved today after the chairman resigned. The rest of the government went with him. And so right now there's a bit of a small power vacuum. The Russians are most likely going to fill it with some kind of puppet government, or the DPR is going to start descending into chaos. That's most likely the most unlikely option out of those two. Most likely the Russians will just appoint new government officials. Moving on down into the Severodonetsk area, we've seen that the 30th has knocked out a BMP today that was traveling down a road. So let's check this out. We can also see that's right beside a railroad as well. We can see the BMP right there. And now we can see that the BMP is no longer there. It's now become BMP'd in past tense. We now see the BMP burning, and we know that it's going to be well done soon. And with that, that is the end of the video, but of course it's nice to see that the 30th Brigade, which did inflict massive casualties on Russian forces about 3 weeks ago, is still inflicting casualties, but not to the same rate we were seeing on video 3 weeks ago. But still, it's still a Russian loss, and a Russian loss is a good loss. With that, we're now going to be moving up to the village of, well, the city, really, of Bakhmut, where we've actually seen that one of the vans that the Ukrainians have been using for supply runs has been heavily damaged after one of these supply runs. We can see that the van is riddled with bullet holes and also shrapnel, I guess you could say, wounds as well. Just take a look at this.
3 дня на фронте. Машина поработала.
I'm assuming that most of these are shrapnel holes because they're, of course, differently shaped, and you can see some of them are very small, almost like splinters, and so I'm assuming that this is most likely from shrapnel from artillery fire. But still, it's crazy to think that they drove through something like this that hit their van this bad. Now we see the video looping again, but that gives you an idea of the peril that Ukrainian lodgy drivers and their crews go through every single day to just make sure that those front lines keep supplied. And so, huge credit to the logistical units that continuously supply the Ukrainian front lines, even under danger of getting killed themselves and coming under heavy artillery fire, much like we've seen with this van. And that's honestly impressive to think that they barrel through this every single day, perhaps, or maybe every once in a while, because that's, of course, very harrowing, and I'm sure that that's pretty stressful. The Ukrainians, of course, pull through and manage to complete their job, which is supplying the front lines. With that, we're now going to be moving even further down. We're now going to move past the Donetsk area, and we're now going to move towards Mariupol. We actually saw a video today. Unfortunately, it didn't have audio, so sadly I cannot play the audio for y'all, but we can see what a Ukrainian family is living like now inside of the Azovstal. Well, not the Azovstal, I'm sorry, Mariupol. Here we can see some Ukrainian kids playing in an ammo box and also tearing it apart. And we can see the dad and maybe the granddad sitting out in the open with their kids, and then one of them wanders back off into the building. Sadly, it doesn't have any audio, so I can't tell you what they're talking about. But just taking a look at this very first frame here, the situation is awful. They have water jugs in the shopping cart. There's just debris lying all around. Their building that they're living in has largely been destroyed. And it's just terrible. I hate to think that people are still living in this, and there's a lot of people in Mariupol who are stuck in these kinds of conditions. So I hope that they make it out okay. We even heard some reports, although we couldn't verify them enough, that apparently there's now a cholera outbreak in Mariupol due to the low quality of the water that the Russians have now turned back on. So we'll, of course, be trying to keep up to date with that news as well and report if we can verify it. But with that, of course, an unfortunate side of what some poor kids and their innocent relatives, like this old granddad, are having to live through that had absolutely nothing to do with this war, and it's absolutely pointless as far as they're concerned. The Russians had no reason in coming into the country. So with that, that's all the news we have from Mariupol. We're now going to be moving out of Mariupol and further down the front lines towards the area of Polohi, where, that's right, the Azov is using an MG3. I actually got a discussion, well, not really a discussion, but I actually got a point from someone today because I have actually fired an MG3, and I can tell you that the MG3 I fired had a much higher firing rate than this one. And I was actually explained that apparently this is a different variant of the MG3 that has a heavier bolt, which leads to it having a slower rate of fire, which honestly I think is very reasonable. It's better for ammo conservation, and also it's not leading to a wearing down of the parts as quickly as a higher rate of fire. For example, the lower rate of fire, you have to replace the barrel less, which is something you really have to contend with on an MG3 or an MG42. But here's the video of this Azov soldier firing this MG3 at the Russians in the distance. We can hear a firefight in the distance, which does let us know that this is obviously a firefight. Of course, this isn't anything being faked by the Azov. And we can see that wonderful MG3 at work. Now, that's a gun that I have a lot of respect for, is the MG34s, which then evolved into the MG42s, and finally the MG3. All of them are incredibly good machine guns. I've actually been able to shoot them in real life, and I can tell you, I'm a big fan of them. I think they do a pretty good job. But then again, most machine guns do a pretty good job. But these, of course, like some others, have a really good cool factor to them, I guess you could say. And so for that reason alone, I think they're pretty neat. Anyways, without going too much into the qualitative assessments, we're now going to be moving further down the front lines and towards the area directly south of Zaporizhia, where today we've seen that grenades from a drone toasted a couple of BMD-2s. This may be the drone that we saw launched earlier, but sadly it's not. The 95th Brigade is not stationed south of Zaporizhia. But here we can see these BMD-2s on film, and we can see the drone getting ready to drop its bomblets on them. You can now see the drone hovering over the BMD-2s and now dropping one of the bomblets. It's now gliding over to the BMD-2, and it looks like they dropped another, and this one is also gliding down to the BMD-2. And now they've dropped another, and this one's also gliding towards the BMD-2. And now they've dropped another, and that one's also gliding towards the BMD-2. But where are the hits? Where are the hits? Like, they haven't shown a hit yet. Okay, now we finally got a hit. That BMD just burned up like a candle. Now we can see the BMD burning up again. We can see another BMD catching on fire. A fourth BMD catching on fire. Or maybe the same one from a different angle. I'm not really sure. But we can see that at least one, maybe two BMDs were destroyed by drones today. Flown. Let me make sure I get this correct. By an unknown unit. I'm not really sure which unit flew these, but we can see that they caused a massive amount of damage to these BMD-2s and destroyed a couple. And so, of course, great to see that the Ukrainians are inflicting casualties by and large across the board as the war continues on, and hopefully they can continue to do so, and hopefully get the ability to launch some counterattacks very soon. With that, let me make sure I don't have any... Okay, we don't have any international news. With that, we now have 2 bits of news left. Moving on into the city of Dnipro, there was a nice little video I saw today of a cute little kid that was sitting in the middle of a square and playing that very famous song that a lot of y'all know, Stefania. Hopefully I don't get copyright striked for this, and I think the YouTube headquarters is already traveling on their way to Ukraine to pick up this girl and lose her monetization rights. So anyways, here is this video of this little girl playing Stefania.
Може більше і від цього минуло мене дорогами прийде завжди до тебе. Вона не розбудить, не будить, мене в селі бурю забере бабулі, дедулі, ніби вони кулі. Дуже добре за мене не була в мене так, було дуже за мене вийде мене так.
And that's the end of the video. Of course, really cute. And she's actually managed with this little show, you know, of like playing the recorder, actually managed to raise $4,000 for the troops on the front lines. And for a girl her age, that is incredibly impressive. I mean, like no other kid in the world can probably say that they've managed to raise $4,000 in funds for the Ukrainian military, but this girl has, and she's out there on the streets literally playing her heart out to try and get as much support for Ukraine. So best of luck to this little girl. Of course, it's a very cute video. I can see a lot of y'all in the live chat melting over it, and I do have to agree. Pretty sweet little video. I hope that this girl stays all right. Of course, war against Russia is a very dangerous thing. Russians don't care if you're a man, woman, or a child. They'll kill them all the same. And so I hope that she stays safe and that she manages to get through this war all right, and that she can tell her kids when she grows up the story about how she actually helped out the Ukrainian military when she was just a small child. And so with that, we're now going to go full circle all the way back to where we started off at the very beginning of the stream in Kyiv. And so, without further ado, here's the speech from the man, the myth, the legend himself, the guy who's been here for 105 days and even longer before the war started, President Zelensky. And here is his speech for day 105.
Українці, українки, усі наші захисники і захисниці. Рівно 10 років тому у цей день почався Євро 2012, чемпіонат Європи з футболу, який об'єднав усіх українців, поляків, українців та абсолютну більшість європейців. Церемонія відкриття була у Варшаві, фінальна церемонія у нас в столиці, в Києві. Матчі проводились в різних містах наших двох країн, і, зокрема, в Донецьку, на Донбас-арені. Всього лише 10 років минуло, а таке враження, що це було в іншому світі. Якраз сьогодні окупанти випустили абсолютно божевільну новину, що нібито вони готуються об'єднати якісь футбольні клуби з усіх окупованих територій в один псевдочемпіонат, причому з Донецька, Луганська, Херсона, Мелітополя, Криму, навіть з частин території Грузії. Просто знущання окупантів над людьми, які все прекрасно пам'ятають. 10 років тому наш Донецьк був сильним, гордим, розвинутим містом, а потім прийшла Росія. Принесла якраз такого неадекватного рівня ідеї. І тепер це місто – привид, яке втратило більшість людей, тисячі життів і абсолютно всі перспективи. Тільки повернення України, яке обов'язково буде, тільки наш прапор, тільки український закон означатиме для цих територій, для цих міст просто нормальне життя, знову життя, яке там було. Мирне, безпечне, відкрите для всього світу. І, звичайно, нові матчі команд світового рівня на Донбас-арені. Я вдячний президенту Польщі Анджею Дуді і другу всіх українців за те, що він вирушив зараз у спеціальну поїздку країнами Європи для підтримки європейської перспективи нашої держави. Саме в цьому червні маємо отримати рішення щодо кандидатства, і всі наші друзі, всі наші дипломати зараз працюють для цього, працюють наповну. Разом з Анджеєм мала поїхати і президентка Словаччини Зузана Чапутова. Планувалася така спільна ініціатива двох лідерів. Завадив позитивний тест на ковід. Що ж, такі умови нашого життя зараз. Бажаю Зузані якнайшвидшого одужання. Говорив сьогодні з канцлером Німеччини Шольцем також про рішення на користь України щодо кандидатства, яке насправді буде рішенням і на користь Європи. Про оборонну підтримку говорили і про продовольчу безпеку, гарантування якої вже дійсно глобальний інтерес, бо ніхто не може бути зацікавлений, окрім Російської держави, в глобальній продовольчій кризі. Звернувся сьогодні до учасників інвестиційної конференції, організованої для обговорення економічних перспектив нашої держави. Серед учасників були представники найбільших світових фондів. Захід, хоча і не публічний був, але все ж таки дуже вагомий, потужний, запросив їх інвестувати в Україну. Інвестуйте. Також поспілкувався з учасниками спільноти, керівниками найбільших американських компаній. Це вже 133-й такий саміт, і цьогоріч він об'єднав провідні сили глобального бізнесу. Обговорили як бізнес може допомагати Україні вистояти. Закликав виходити з російського ринку і не підтримувати своїми податками цю війну. Для мене дуже важливо побачити, що в такій аудиторії, а це, ще раз підкреслюю, представники найбільш впливової частини американського бізнесу, вважають, що санкції проти Росії потрібно посилювати. Отже, було би правильним для політиків почути цю позицію. Провідний бізнес і більшість в суспільствах Америки та Європи вважають, що поки ще недостатньо тиску на Російську Федерацію для припинення цієї війни. Северодонецьк за підсумками і цієї доби, вже 105-ї, до речі, доби повномасштабної війни, залишається епіцентром протистояння на Донбасі. Захищаємо наші позиції, завдаємо ворогу відчутних втрат. Це дуже жорстока битва, дуже важка. Мабуть, одна з найважчих протягом всієї цієї війни. Я вдячний кожному і кожній, хто обороняється на цьому напрямку. Багато в чому саме там зараз вирішується доля нашого Донбасу. Також підписав укази про нагородження наших героїв. 285 учасників бойових дій, відзначені державними нагородами, 68 з них посмертно. Вічна пам'ять усім, хто віддав життя за Україну. Вічна слава нашим героям, які захищають державу. Слава Україні!
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Zelensky, and that rounds out the Day 105 news. We're, of course, going to move into the question segment here in a second, but if you were here for the news alone and you are a new viewer, I hope you did enjoy the stream. If you did, make sure to hit the like button. We're right now sitting around 2,000 likes. Can we pass that in the next second? I know I got a little bit of a lag in between y'all and the stream, so I'm going to say yes. So with that, we've passed 2,000 likes. Let's go. But anyways, if you are new to the channel, please make sure to subscribe. We do upload these streams every single night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, and we cover the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. Of course, this runs every day of the week, except for Mondays. We do take Mondays off, and we do not upload either a summary video or a stream on Mondays. We also upload summary videos. The time that the summary videos has been pushed back by about 3 hours. But we do upload the summary videos for people who may not have a lot of time and just want to get a little bit of a rundown on the major events that were caught on film during the war each day. So with that, I thank you all, if you were here for the news alone, for watching, and I hope you all have a great night. But for the rest of you, we're going to be moving on into the question segment. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and first up on our questions, we have a $50 donation from Russell Wheeler, who says, Aggies fan donation would have been more, but recruiting.
Well, I thank you very much for the support. Aggies fan donation. Aggies fan. Aggies. Apparently Texas A&M. Texas A&M. Texas A&M. A&M? A&M? Come on. 1 second. I'm trying to see. Texas A&M. What are they known as? I have no clue. But anyways, apparently they're known as the Aggies because that's what pulled up. But I do thank you very much for the support, Russell. It does mean a lot to me, and it does help us to run this channel a huge deal. Without support from the viewers, of course, the gears here would grind to a halt, because we do always have to make sure that we can take care of ourselves, pay for college, pay for bills, pay for the car stuff, all that sorts of stuff. And of course, y'all help us to do that and make sure that we can focus on this as our primary jobs. And so I thank you once again, Russell, and it's totally fine. Any amount of support helps out this channel a massive deal. And so I thank you once again. It means a lot to me. And with that being said, we are on to the next question.
And moving on, we have a $30 donation from John Boyer, who is a channel regular, who says, question, can the Ukrainians hit the Russian supply railroads recently reconnected through Mariupol and the South? I admire Enforcer Matt's great commitment to their efforts, and Slava President Zelensky, and Slava Ukraine.
And I thank you very much for the support, and I also thank you for the great words to Ukraine. And to answer that question, yes, I do believe the Ukrainians would have the ability to strike out these railroads. Of course, I haven't heard a lot about railroad operations near Mariupol. I don't know if they've restored the railroads heading from Rostov-on-Don to Melitopol, but we do know that the railheads have always been intact, leading from Kherson to Melitopol and then beyond. So, in that regard, I believe the Ukrainians could strike at them. It's just a question of how, and there's also the question of, are there any bridges to attack? Because while you can, of course, attack the railroads themselves, if they're just on level ground and you destroy, like, say, a 10-yard area of railroad, the Russians can, of course, rebuild that within a day or within hours, and so it's not really that much of a hindrance. But if, for example, you take out a railroad bridge, that could be a massive hindrance that takes days or weeks to fix. And so, in that regard, it would be a question of, is there anything down there to be destroyed that would actually cause massive hindrances in their logistical chains and actually be worth expending the resources to do? So with that, I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And to try and answer that one a little bit better, let me get down here. We can see a railroad line here. And let me see if I can follow this up to the partisan area. So it's about right here near Nelhivka. So let's see from the front line how far that is. That's around 30 miles. So with an M142 near the front, they could reach out nearly to Bryansk and hit the railroads there. And so the answer to that question is yes. If they put some of their longer range MLRSs and artillery systems in a little bit of danger, they could reach out and try and hit some of the vital infrastructure of the railroads in southern Ukraine. And so I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question, at least to some degree. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $20 donation from Ron Anderson, who says, I still can't believe you are both so young. Matt sounds like he would be singing on Hee Haw. I really do enjoy your daily breakdowns. As an old soldier, I don't seem to find many people that are into what is happening. And Ron, I don't know if that was a swipe at me or what, but that was something else.
All right, Matthew, we gotta fill them in. We've known about that show for a long time, and we are always joking about gloom, despair, and agony on me. You know, we've been joking about that for a while, so we know exactly what you're talking about. And yeah, Matthew does sound like that. I'm going to agree with you and jump on him for a minute. So with that, of course, I thank you so much for the support. And to a lot of our viewers, that is actually something that comes as a shock to some of our new viewers, or some people who maybe were just never around for my spiel. But Matthew is only 21 years old, and I'm only 20. And we've been doing this for quite a while, and apparently we've gotten a lot of respect from a lot of people for what we do, our analysis, and the way we cover the news. And of course, I'm very appreciative to everyone who does enjoy it, and I hope it doesn't come as a shock to too many people that I'm 20. You know, of course, while the average 20-year-old is not really into this stuff, hopefully I can kind of set a precedent that there's a small minority that may be and may know a little bit about what they're talking about. So with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does address your comment in a way. And of course, I thank you for the very kind words. It does mean a lot to Matthew and me. We do put a lot of effort into this, and we're always very appreciative. And with that being said, we are on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $50 donation from William Allen, who says he was making fun of Bama's coach that said A&M bought all its football recruits for the 2022 class. The small B in Bama is on purpose. We do the same thing for Texas University. TU. Woo!
Well, I thank you very much for the support. Sadly, I don't really know enough about football to even know what context that's in. I'm very sorry about that. I know nothing about European football either. I just play FIFA. I got that game a while ago, and I started playing it. And honestly, European football, I think, at least in the terms of playing them as a game, is a lot more fun than playing like Madden or something. Sorry if that offends anyone, but European football is just faster paced and you get more action and more bang for your buck, and it's not as slow paced and takes as many plays and stuff as American football. But still, I don't really know a lot about that, but I do thank you very much for sharing the information with us, because I will try and maybe get a better grasp of sports in the future. I just don't know when that time will be, because right now my time is eaten up. And so with that, I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does address the comment. And with that being said, I thank you very much once again, William Allen, for the massive amount of support. and it does help out our channel a lot. And you've also been a return viewer that's helped out our channel to keep running for an incredibly long time. And I thank you very much for it, because without our support from the viewers, we couldn't do this. And so thank you once again. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Jack Schultz, who says, "What is the likelihood that we'll see a mass counteroffensive by the Ukrainians anytime soon? I thought you had said one episode that they had around 1 million personnel either training or ready to fight, so what are they waiting for?"
Ooh, I don't think I ever said that. That's something I'm pretty sure I did not say. 1 million personnel is a very high number. I don't know if they'd ever have enough equipment to field a million men and women. There's, of course, women out there fighting on the front as well. But I just don't think there's that many training. I would assume that they probably have around 50,000 training as a reasonable number, and that would be on the very high end, because it takes a while to train them. It takes a decent amount of resources. Of course, it takes cadre to teach them, and it also takes gear to equip them. And so you always have to weigh that in perspective, and with that in mind, 1 million new soldiers just not possible. But moving on to the front lines, I of course don't weigh in a lot on what the Ukrainians will do, but I think I can say with pretty relative certainty that one could assume that a counterattack would be soon. They're not going to be large. It's not going to be spanning the entire front lines, but there will be a counterattack here in the future that will hopefully make some progress. And so with that, I hope that kind of answers the question away. I do think it will happen. I'm not going to say where, but I feel like they will make some success. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question, but I thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a super chat from a channel legend. I say it every single time, and I really mean it. It's from BC Skyman, who puts in a $20 super chat and says, "Spam sandwich time."
Hey! Well, I thank you so much, BC Skyman, for the support, and I thank you for backing up my dietary choices. A lot of people say Spam has no nutritional content. It sucks. It doesn't taste good. And you know what I say to that? I say that cooked up Spam with some cheese on a bread with mayonnaise tastes great. It tastes like a ham sandwich with cheese, and I think that is phenomenal coming from a literal block of ham that comes out of a can. And so I thank you so much for the support, BC Skyman, and of course, it's always greatly appreciated, and we do enjoy a legend such as yourself gracing us with your visit. And so thank you once again, BC. I hope you have hope that did address the comment pretty well. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And next up, I'm going to recognize a few donations that without comments. Excuse me. We have a $10 donation from SP Detectors, a $10 donation from Mark Sova, and an $8 donation from RM Crosby. So thank you very much to all three of you for your support of the channel. And with that being said, we are moving on to our next super chat, which is from JK, who puts in a $10 super chat and says, "Coffee and ice cream found. Fund."
Coffee and ice cream. This guy's getting elaborate, Matthew. I mean, like, we're about to have like
Yes.
a little coffee table snack. I thank you very much for the support, man, because no one's ever given us the ice cream with the coffee. It's always the coffee or sometimes the creamer, but never coffee and ice cream. That's the first we've ever had that. And so I thank you very much for the support. And we actually did get natural vanilla bean ice cream just a while ago to go with some desserts that we've been making. And I put it in a coffee. I actually got like a lump of it and just dropped it in the coffee and spun it around until it dissolved. And it actually tasted really good in the coffee. So I thank you very much for the support. I will make sure to use the coffee with the ice cream at the same time. I think ice cream and coffee can coexist peacefully. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support and also the ice cream. And with that, we are on the next question.
And up to the next question, we have one from Yves Sungalo, who puts in a $10 donation and says, "I've been following you since day 5. Love your work and keep it up. From your knowledge, what's the artillery number ration between Russia and Ukraine? Some say it's 1 through 10. I wanted to hear it from you."
Well, I thank you very much for the support. And also, it's really cool to hear you've been around for a long time. Day 4 was when most people came in. So you came in on the day after the massive wave. Which was day 4 on day 5. But to answer that question, I can't really give you a surefire answer as to, and I'm trying to think about how to answer this, the ratio between Russian artillery and Ukrainian artillery. every single figure that comes out about that is very ambiguous because no one actually knows how many artillery pieces the Russians are fielding in the theater, and no one knows how many artillery pieces the Ukrainians are fielding on the front lines. So sadly, there's no figures to go off of to calculate what kind of ratio there is in between Ukrainian artillery and Russian artillery. While on paper that ratio could be 10 to 1, one does have to remember that you can only fit so much artillery in a single spot before you start to overcrowd. And if the Russians had 10 times the artillery, hell, I mean, like, the Ukrainians would just be obliterated. You know, and I think that you can only have so much artillery operational in a single area, and it seems reasonable to me to say that without it becoming overcrowded and just getting artillery pieces unnecessarily destroyed because there's really nowhere for them to go. So I hope that kind of answers the question. Unfortunately, I don't have a way to really give a ratio between Ukrainian and Russian artillery rather than what they have in total on paper each. And that's not really good to go by because the Russians obviously aren't using their entire artillery force in Ukraine. So with that, I hope that kind of gives an answer as to why I can't really give an accurate answer to that. And so with that, I thank you very much for the support. And I hate I can't give you an answer, but I wouldn't feel confident in doing that because I'd pretty much just be trying to act. I would pretty much be acting like a know-it-all, although I don't have enough information to give an answer at all. And so with that, we're on to the next question. But I thank you very much for the support.
And up next, we have a $7.77 donation from Mike D, who says, how long until we see Russians reactivating what T-34s they have left?
Well, thank you very much for the great question. I like that one. I think we'll be seeing that within the next 5 months. And so with that, I hope that does address the question. I really did like the joke there. That was a pretty good one. And so with that, thank you very much for the support. And we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $20 donation from Mr. Diggs, another channel regular, who says, you guys are really young. Coffee and ice cream are very important. And is Patrick Lancaster a traitor? Thank you again.
Well, no problem at all, Mr. Diggs. We're starting to get a lot of Misters in here. We got Mr. Lunchtime, well, not Mr. Mortar, Professor Mortar. We have a whole bunch of people with titles in here. Now we got Mr. Diggs. So to answer that question, Patrick Lancaster is a traitor in my opinion. And of course, that's just an opinion because while what he's doing is, of course, contradictory to the United States interests, we aren't necessarily in the war militarily for him to be considered a traitor. And so in that regard, technically he isn't, but I consider him siding with our national rivals and also a country that is hell-bent on not only conquering Ukraine, but conquering the rest of what they need in Europe and also defeating the United States. I consider it a traitor move to go to Russia and then act like they're on the right side. I think that's treason, and I think that the United States ought to treat him as such and maybe revoke his citizenship, considering that he cannot be trusted to live in the United States without trying to give away perhaps maybe state secrets or maybe be a spy for the Russians. Of course, that's getting really into the paranoid avenue of things, but that is what an intelligence agency should think or would be thinking about someone that's doing what he's doing. So with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. It's a pretty good one, actually. It's a fairly reasonable one. And also, we are really young. I want to make sure to address that again. We are very young, and I realize that. And what's funny to me is that when I was 12 years old, I thought when I would become 18 years old, I would feel much older. But honestly, I don't think I've mentally progressed much farther than from when I was 12. I've kind of been this way ever since I can really remember. So, yeah, it's not that old, actually. When you think about it, being 12 years old is only 8 years away from where I'm at right now. So I thank you very much for the support. Now, I hope that does address the question. And once again, the support does mean a lot to us. And with that being said, we are on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $30 super chat from Uncle Tababite, who says, for Musubi and coffee, sad state of the world, go Ukraine.
And I thank you very much for the support, and everyone's pulling through with a coffee fund tonight. We are going to be drinking so much coffee, we're going to be spinning. But I thank you very much for the support. And also, I do have to agree, it is a sad state of the world. It's unfortunate that this war is going the way it is. And another thing that I'd like to point out is that Armenia and Azerbaijan actually went to war in 2020, I believe. And let's pull that up. Armenia, Azerbaijan conflict, the war. In 2021, actually, correction. Nope, it was 2020. So let's see here. The Russians, of course, were involved. They were an arms supplier to Armenia. And we can also see that the Azerbaijanis were supported by Turkey. And if you know anything about the history of what was going on in that area historically beforehand, the Turks and the Armenians have a pretty nasty history, specifically what the Turks did to the Armenians. We can see here that this war lasted 1 month and 2 weeks. Not long at all. This is, in fact, about as long as the invasion of Iraq went, just by over a week. We can then see that the Azerbaijanis lost 2,906 men. The Armenians lost almost 4,000 men. We can also see a couple of other figures and statistics here. But what I'm trying to point out is that while this war happened recently, in 2020, it was an incredibly short war, and it had an incredibly small amount of casualties, kind of what everyone was thinking this war was going to become. Everyone thought the Ukrainians would just fall, and that would be the end. But obviously they didn't. And while it's great to know that the Ukrainians are holding on, that they do continue to fight, it's of course unfortunate to think about all the damage and suffering that's being caused because of this war, which is entirely senseless because, of course, you know, I've gone over this a million times, but the Russians really have no legitimate reason for invading Ukraine. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I do agree, go Ukraine. And with that being said, I thank you once again, and we're on to the next question.
And it is now time once again to recognize a few donations without comments here. We have a $10 donation from Darth Fred, and we have a $2 donation from Junebug. And I'm just checking here to make sure I didn't miss any. Let's see here. And also a $1 donation from Aiden Reuter. So thank you very much to all of you for your support. No matter how small or large, it is very much appreciated. So up next, we have a $10 donation from William Allen again, who says, hot apple pie with a scoop of cinnamon ice cream on top, along with a hot cup of GI coffee.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I also thank you for the incredible idea as to what to get and kind of what to eat. Let me make sure I'm getting this right. Cinnamon ice cream. Have we ever had cinnamon ice cream, Matthew?
I didn't even know they made that.
I didn't know they made that either. Let me pull that up real quick. Cinnamon ice cream. Cinnamon. Now that we got that spelled correctly, ice cream. Wow, there's really cinnamon ice cream. I didn't even know that this was something that actually existed. So thank you, William, for bringing that up, because we had no clue. Oh, that showed where I was, but we had no clue. Oh. So, Matthew, we need to pack up and leave. But anyways, we had no clue that cinnamon ice cream existed at all. And also, GI coffee. I've never actually had GI coffee. I've had reenacting coffee, and so if that's similar, then I can get behind that. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, William, and I also thank you for the great ideas of food that we could have. And so with that, thank you once again, and we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have yet another super chat from Darth Fred, who puts in another $10 donation and says, how confident are you in the north and south flanks of Lysychansk holding? This is the only part of the front that deeply worries me.
Well, I thank you very much for the support once again, Fred. That's the second time you support us tonight, and of course, it's always greatly appreciated. The northern flank of Lysychansk is heavily defended, clearly because it has the natural obstacle of the Severodonetsk River, and then also, this area is largely on a bluff across this entire length of the Severodonetsk River, and so in that regard, very defensible position. Meanwhile, in the south, the Russians are on the ridge, and moving... Sorry, y'all, excuse me. But moving towards the city of Lysychansk itself. So this flank is the one that I would worry about if I was to pick one to concern over, because the Russians can actually fight a normal battle down here in the south as compared to the north where they really can't. And so I believe that this southern area here is where the large amount of fighting is going to occur once the Ukrainians withdraw from Severodonetsk, if they do, although I have heard some Ukrainian officials say they will never fall back from Severodonetsk. So with that, I hope that answers the question as to which one may be more concerning. I feel like the Ukrainians can hold it. They've, of course, held the line across the entirety of the front, by and large, fairly well. And so I think the same will be said for the south of Lysychansk as well. And so I thank you very much for the support, Darth Fred. I hope that answers the question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from Winston Segner, who says, "Thank you for all you do."
And I thank you for watching this channel and supporting us to let us keep on doing all we do. It's always greatly appreciated, and it helps us out a massive deal. Like, I wish I really had new stuff to say, but there's not really a lot of ways to say this in English. But maybe I should learn how to say this in Ukrainian, and I'll start saying it that way. But I do thank you so much for the support. It does help us out a huge deal, and I thank you so much for enjoying it as well. If no one was enjoying this, I wouldn't really have a fun time doing this. So with that, thank you once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And moving on, we have a $5 donation from Dermot Hutton, who says, "You posted a video earlier of Ukraine using MG3. It was more likely to be the cut down slower MG1A2, MG42/59, hence the slower fire rate."
Could you give me the numbers of that MG again?
Let's see. At first he said MG3, and then he said MG1A2, and MG42/59.
MG42/59. Let's check out that MG4259. The slow fire commercial MG42. Let's check out this YouTube video right here. Okay, that's an MG4259. That thing is still firing faster than the one we saw in the video. That MG3 in the video was nearly firing at the same rate, I would say, as a M60, if I was to try and compare it to anything. But I thank you very much for the support, and I also thank you for the ideas as to which one that could be. It could be the other ones that you mentioned, and so will that. Thank you once again. We will try and look into that, and I'm glad that a lot of firearm experts do know which machine guns are which. I do know that there's, of course, the MG34, 42, and 3, but I don't know about some of the exact variations in between some of them. And so, I hope that does address the comment, and I thank you very much for the support. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And up next, we have another super chat from SP Detectors, who puts in a $5 donation and says, "In fact, you can see the location of Russian drone operators on their own laptops. I hope that the Ukrainians have fixed it."
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I thank you very much for sharing that with me, because I actually did not think about that when I was watching that video, but apparently they may have, and that's something that the Russians do a lot. They give away their locations very easily, and so hopefully the Ukrainians did fix that little issue, and those drone operators will be getting some well-deserved rest. And so with that, I thank you very much for providing that information to us. I didn't actually know it. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And up next, we are paid a visit, excuse me, we are paid a visit by Jason Bourne, who puts in a $5 super chat and says, "In that video, the helicopter fired on the Ukrainian positions, so they took cover."
Well, I thank you very much for clarifying that. It did sound like that, but I couldn't really see it on film all too well, and so I couldn't say for certain. The rounds did sound like they were falling close, though, but I was like, I don't really want to say that, because what if those helicopters were firing at something else? So I thank you very much for clarifying that for me, because I was pretty unsure about that in the video. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I thank you for clarifying what was going on in that video for me. And with that, excuse me, we're moving on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $4 super chat from Banana Boat 30 Plus, who says, "Do you have a Discord? If not, it could be a good way to keep in touch with people." And yes, we do have a Discord, and the link should be down in the description.
And I will just have to agree with Matthew with that one. If you would like to join the Discord, there is a link in the description below. You can click on it, and it takes you to the magical world of Discord, where we have wonderful moderators, we have wonderful viewers, and they all sit down and they talk about stuff about the Ukraine war, stuff in general. Of course, we do have rules, and I would like to say that because some people come in and they start doing weird stuff, like they look for gore exclusively or something like that, and you know, anyways, there is a Discord. So with that, I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does address the question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $2 donation from AC0, who says, "Hi, Enforcer and Matt. Keep up the good work. Hooah!"
Well, I thank you very much for the support. We will try to keep up the good work, and hooah! And with that, we are on to the next question.
And we have another $2 super chat from AC0, who says, "Stay safe. There's still Mr. Lunchtime out there."
That's true. Mr. Lunchtime is still out there, and we always keep a close eye out to make sure that he's not getting too close to us. That's something we're always concerned about. taking that on a serious note, is stalkers. Apparently, we've had a few already. So with that, I thank you so much for the support, and we are keeping an eye out for Mr. Lunchtime. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you very much for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we are now to our last super chat of the night. And we're actually going to have quite a bit of time for live chat questions. And we do have quite a few of those. So the last one of the night goes to Aiden Reuter again, who puts in a $2 donation and says, very excitedly, "You said my name right."
And that's right. Oh, we did say your name right. We do know how to pronounce names to some degree. Of course, we had the grammar Nazis. I haven't seen a lot of them around anymore. I think that some of them may have left. But we used to have grammar Nazis whenever I would travel around the front and say something. Excuse me, it's actually not Zaporizhia, it's Zaporizhia, or something like that. And so I thank you very much for appreciating that we do try our best to pronounce things correctly when we know how they're pronounced and if we can. And so with that, thank you once again. And we're now going to be moving on to some live chat questions.
All right. And first up from the live chat, we have one from Pakatang, who says, "Enforcer, if NATO provided too much support for Ukraine, could Ukraine invade Russia? Could that also provoke a Russian nuclear response?"
Ukraine would never have a possibility of invading Russia. One does have to remember that they are only a country of 40 million, and so versing their populations, 40 million versus around 130 million, the Ukrainians manpower-wise would eventually lose the war, regardless of how many Russian casualties were taken. On top of that, it wouldn't be smart for the Ukrainians because this war is dragging their economy down along with the Russians, and so their economy would go into further and further neglect as the war dragged on. The Ukrainians, of course, are fighting a defensive war, and they really have no objectives of invading Russia. I guess the only one you could consider is to depose the government. But is that really worth hundreds of thousands of lives to just try and depose Putin when this war and losing it in its own right, just in a defensive stance, may lead to the collapse of the government anyways? And I don't really think it would lead to a nuclear response. I think that would be something that the Russians would freak out about and most likely try and request foreign help, like from the Chinese, for example. But then that's a whole other question if they would ever step up and actually help out. And so, with that, I hope that does address the question in a way. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And real quick, we had one more super chat come in. We had an $8 donation from Jonathan Toe, who says, "Keep up the hard work."
And I thank you very much for the support, Jonathan Toe, and we will keep up the good work. It looks like we got John Toe here in the chat, who may be the next patron saint of toes if the Toe missiles are ever sent over to Ukraine. And so with that, I hope I addressed that comment pretty well, and I thank you once again for the support. It helps out our channel a lot. We're always appreciative of everyone who helps us to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And up next, we have a question from Fernando de la Luz. Hopefully I'm saying that properly. I doubt it. But he says, "When I was in the Navy, we used M60, and does the Ukrainians use them?"
I don't think the Ukrainians use M60s. I haven't seen them using one yet, so I don't think they've ever gotten any. So to answer that question in brief, I think the answer to that is no. But of course, I thank you very much for your service. Being in the Navy, of course, is an interesting side of the service. There, of course, are a lot of people who serve in the Navy, and there's many different ways you can, of course, on a frigate, aircraft carrier, submarine, so on. But it's a really interesting service. Honestly, though, I'm a huge fan of the Army. If I had to pick a service, specifically because for their enlisted soldiers, they actually, I think the Navy does this as well these days, but they actually let them pick their jobs. I don't like the idea of the Air Force because whenever, I mean, like, the Air Force is great, don't get me wrong, all the branches are great, but the way they go around recruiting normal enlisted men is, I'm not really a big fan of how the Air Force does it. First off, you have to get a high ASVAB score, and I got a high enough score that I could go into any branch I wanted and almost pick every single job I wanted to when I took the ASVAB, but I still didn't like that kind of mindset that Air Force recruiters had, because it was almost like, I could care less if you join. Like, that was it. Like, you could be like, hey, I want to join the Air Force. Okay, I'll get back to you in like 2 months. You know, and I actually have a friend who's trying to get into the Air Force, and his recruiter never gets back with him. It's like they almost don't even have a quota to fulfill with the recruiters in the Air Force. And I just don't like that. And on top of that, you can't even pick your job you just fill out a wish list, and then they may not even give you a job that was on your wish list. And I don't really like that either. But still, the Air Force is a pretty good service. A lot of people say if you're looking for the most normal life, you go and pick the Air Force, and by and large, that's mostly true from what I've been told. And so with that, I thank you very much for the question, and also for telling us that little tidbit, and I hope I commented on it fairly well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we actually have one more super chat that just came in from HT, who puts in a $20 donation and says, "Thanks for all you do, Don."
Well, I thank you for all you will help me support Don. Don is, of course, a great support, Don. And with that being said, Don, thank you once again, Don. Without it, we, of course, couldn't help run this channel, Don. And so with that, I hope you did enjoy that. And with that being said, thank you so much for the support, and we're going to be moving on to the next question.
And just to clear up the record, we have been paid our first visit from the Cambot tonight, and it probably won't be the last, would be my guess. So, moving on, we have a question from Judy Jackson, who says, "Enforcer or Matt, is it true that there was a thermonuclear discharge at Ramstein base today?"
No. If there was a thermonuclear discharge at Ramstein, that would have clearly made more news than the Ukraine war even. So the answer to that is no. That did not happen. So I hope I answered that question and dispelled the rumor that there was a thermonuclear discharge at Ramstein. And so with that, we're on to the next question.
So next up, we have a question from Abacus, who says, "Enforcer, I thought that the Russian army should collapse due to contracts needs to be resigned, but apparently not. Propaganda is working or what?"
Could you reread that one to me one more time?
They say, "Enforcer, I thought that the Russian army should collapse due to contracts needs to be resigned," I think is what he meant to say, but apparently not. Is propaganda working?
I don't really know what specifically you're talking about, and there's a lot of people out there who put a lot of hope onto things that I consider small fry stuff. Like when contracts are expiring, that doesn't really mean much. A lot of them are probably going to re-enlist because a lot of them come from incredibly poor cities in Russia, and so the army is the only thing they have, and so even being in the meat grinder, they're going to stay in. And on top of that, the other thing is that it's really ambiguous. I mean, like, contracts are always ending in the Russian military, and so it's not really like, yeah, I mean, like, it's not really like these contracts end. It's like the great movie feat. Oh, the war's over. It was never going to happen that way, and so, you know, the Russian army isn't going to collapse. And it's kind of like all of the tabloid talk about the Russians are going to, excuse me, I got some hair in my mouth. I don't know how, but the Russians are going to default on their loans, and then their economy is going to collapse. And I haven't seen a country undergo that in the course of history, really. And so I don't really think that that was going to happen either, and it never did. And so I hope that kind of addresses the question. One thing I have to say is that while everyone always wants to be gung-ho and surefire about having the Russians lose and having the toughest time during this war, I always try and think about things realistically. And whenever I hear that, I don't ever want to be rude and just say it's going to be impossible. But in the back of my head, I'm always saying that's highly unlikely, just because there's never a single event that just leads to the death knell of something. It's multiple events that lead to the end. You can see that in every single example. So with that, I hope that does address the question. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And let me recognize one more super chat that came in. We have a $2 donation from CA Lags, who says, "For more spam."
Well, I thank you so much for the support, CA Lags, and we will get more spam. And so with that, thank you once again for the support, and we're going to be moving on to the next question.
And we actually have two more super chats that just came in. We have a $10 super chat from Jason Bourne, who says, "Russia removed age and health limits on military service, so absolutely anyone can be drafted by being forced to sign a contract."
Well, that's really interesting. I actually didn't know that. I'll have to try and check up on that one and make sure, just in case. But that is something new to me. And of course, I think that would be tough, because while of course they can be drafted, the question is, will they be drafted? Because the Russians may have destroyed their draft eligibility paperwork after they passed the age limit. to be drafted. They may have destroyed all the paperwork and information then. And also for people who are too young, obviously they're not going to be, well, I mean, like, they may take children, who knows, but that's, of course, I guess you could say something interesting. And I think that is something interesting to know, and that may be one of the reasons why the solitary contract fiasco wasn't as big of a deal as everyone had hoped and intended for. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, well, at least a comment, and I do thank you very much for the support. And with that being said, we are on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $2 super chat from Aiden Reuter, who says, I work for John Deere. The tanks are over drawbar rating.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, Aiden Reuter, and also I thank you very much for sharing that little tidbit of info about the drawbar rating for the tanks. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, and with that, we're going to be moving on to the next question.
And next up, we have another $20 donation from William Allen, who says, Enforcer, I'm formerly 3 years in Air Force recruiting. If you have problems with your recruiter, contact the recruiting squadron for your area. It will be in the yellow pages.
Well, thank you very much for the support, William. And also another thing is that Matthew and me, at some points, have had experience with all kinds of recruiters. Of course, going through high school, especially in the place we went through, they would pretty much have recruiters come into the class every other week and, of course, give the spiel about joining the military. And I can remember all of them word for word because it didn't matter if they were different recruiters or what, they would come through and they'd all have the same spiel. The National Guard would come in, they'd be like, we're the oldest, 1636. There was a guy in one village, hey, you got a cannon? And then there was a couple of guys in the other village, hey, you got some guns? And they all came together and they formed the National Guard. And that was the story of the National Guard. And then the reserve would come through, hey, you want to be in the military and get a full paycheck, but, you don't really want to serve full time, and the Army Reserve is for you. Like you get the full paycheck and everything. And that wasn't true. That's not true. And then I could go through all of them. I remember every single spiel each one would give. I especially remember the Air Force one, because the Air Force would rarely come through, and whenever they did, their recruiters, and I'm not dogging on the Air Force, this is just my experience with Air Force recruiters. They'd always come through and they'd be chewing on some gum or something. They'd be like, all of y'all are too stupid, really. I mean, like, you got to make a really high score in the ASVAB, like at least a 66, I think it was, or up, to be in the Air Force. And most of y'all don't look cool, so, and that would pretty much be their entire spiel every time they came through. But that, of course, is a good suggestion. Of course, I'm not really looking at joining the military anymore. Of course, trying to get to law school and become an attorney. But still, it is good advice. And so I thank you very much for the support, William, and also sharing a little bit of info with us. And so with that, thank you once again, and we're going to be moving on to the next question.
And up next, we have a question from, actually, we have one more super chat before we get to that question. We have another $10 donation from William Allen, who said, LOL.
Well, I thank you very much once again, William, and I'm glad that you did like my little spiel about the recruiters and stuff. I have a lot of experience with them. Honestly, I could go through and I could name off all different kinds of personalities and people in everything anyone can do. Like there's those kinds of different personalities in gun stores, the police force, all that kind of stuff. I mean, like, you can go through everything. You can go through politicians. There's always these like set types of personalities that people have in all of these different groups. So I hope you enjoyed that one, and it seems like it hit spot on because you found it pretty funny, and apparently it must have resonated with you as well. And so with that, I thank you once again for the support, William. It does help us out a lot. And with that, we're now going to return back to the live chat questions, I believe.
Okay, and back to the live chat questions. The next one is from Ashley, who says, Enforcer, do we have any fresh news about the orc generals recently killed?
Unfortunately, I do not. I don't really focus. Of course, it is big news, but I sadly don't have any to report about. And so with that, I'm going to have to declare ignorance, actually, because I just don't have enough info to even elaborate on that. And so with that, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have one from Linda Vickers, who says, Enforcer, do you wonder if the Ukrainians are begging Zelensky to send more bombs or something into Russia, like tit for tat?
I think there are, but the thing is that the Ukrainians always have to work with restraint, and of course, a large amount of that restraint is due to their lack of supplies. While the Russians, of course, have massive Soviet-era stockpiles of munitions to fire at the Ukrainians do not have that same level of munitions, and so most of their arms and equipment has to be used fighting the defensive war inside of their country instead of trying to reach out into Russia and attacking military infrastructure that, of course, does hurt their logistical situation, but it doesn't really do much more beyond that. And of course, logistics is incredibly important, but usually frontline logistics of getting those supplies directly to the soldiers is much more important than the very rear line, logistics like in Kursk, Voronezh, and Bryansk. So I hope that answers the question. And also, I saw something in the chat, and I want to see about addressing it real quick, Matthew. Let's see. I saw someone say something about the Space Force, and the Space Force is something I was never around in school to actually see come through and recruit. If they ever did get a recruiting spiel, it was always done by an Air Force recruiter, because the Space Force, it doesn't have enough infrastructure of its own yet to really do all of its own stuff, and usually most of the people who go into the Space Force have to go through the Air Force. What's surprisingly interesting is that a lot of people scoffed at the Space Force initially when it was founded. And this is going to weigh in a little bit on my opinions, but there's really no reason to scoff at it, because the Royal Air Force and also the U.S. Air Force really started off in the same way, especially the Royal Air Force, because it was formed in 1918, and the Royal Flying Corps, and people were like, what is this stupid stuff? Like, anyone's actually going to be going to the sky. What are they going to do? Shoot each other up there? And then they ended up shooting each other up there. And so I think that there is potential in the future for the Space Force to really stretch its wings. Obviously, it's not going to be fighting aliens. It's most likely going to be fighting enemy satellites, and also really dominating the cyberspace for the most part in the future in warfare, and I do believe it certainly has its place. Another thing that's a little bit interesting to me about the Space Force in general, and this kind of arches over into the modern world, is that there is so much dissing on electric cars. And while, everyone has their opinions, I'm not getting into the political side of things here. There's one argument that I hear that just doesn't make a lot of sense, and I've heard all kinds of people say this from every single political background, so don't take this as a strike to one group or the other. This is just a critique on this argument. A lot of people sit there and say electric cars are never going to be able to work on their own because they're going to need electrical supplies from outside, to keep on running. And where are they going to get that electricity? And what's crazy is that people used to make that exact same argument about gas-powered cars during the era of horse and wagons. Where is that gas car going to get the gas? Obviously, a horse-drawn carriage is going to have to pull it to it and supply it with its gas. And, that's literally what people say in the modern day. Look, this electric car broke down on the side of the road. Guess what came to the rescue? A gas car with a gas generator. It's like, well, yeah, because the infrastructure doesn't exist for these electric cars to just travel around the country like a gas car yet, but give it time, and that infrastructure will exist. Obviously, another thing that people are talking about is, how will electrical cars operate, putting so much more extra stress on the grid, and, the obvious answer is you'll just build more power plants. But that's going into the political side of things, and I'm not going there, because once we get past the power plant part, then that goes down a whole rabbit hole that's ugly and dark and terrible, but still, I just don't get that argument, because whenever you look at the historical context, people have been making those arguments since the beginning of time. Just give it a few years, and the infrastructure will be there, because there will be companies that pretty much revolve their lives around it. I mean, hell, within the past 2 years of living where I've lived, I've seen parking lots go from just parking stalls to now there's electrical charging stations there. And so I know, give it time, there will be infrastructure for cars to be able to travel around the entirety of the country, and also repairs facilities and, I guess you could say car maintenance facilities that will cater directly to these electric cars. So with that, that's kind of weighing in on that whole entire thing about the Space Force and all that stuff. So with that, we're moving on to the next question.
All right, and up next we have a $20 donation from Junebug72, who says, "Don't listen to the haters. You're talking too much is why the stream works. There are many who just listen, folks who haven't sight, and some who just aren't that savvy. Re-cartology geography, war, etc. Keep talking.
Well, thank you very much for the support, Junebug. And I never really pay those people attention too much because they'll be like, "Oh, stop talking." I'm like, "Well, that's the show." I mean, like, you know, like that's literally the show is me talking. So it's like if you don't want me to talk, then don't watch the show. You know, like that's the one critique that never gets to me. It just confuses me because I'm like, if you don't like me talking, why are you watching the show? You know, like that wouldn't make any sense. That's like going to a comedy routine, like to Jerry Seinfeld's comedy routine and sitting in the crowd, and when he starts his jokes, can you stop the stupid jokes? It's like that's what you're there for. You know, like that one never made any sense to me. Whenever I see people say that, I'm like, oh, that's just a stupid one. That's trying to bait me. So with that, thank you very much for the support, Junebug. And that's kind of what I've already been thinking about. So I'm well ahead on that category of haters, of course, because it doesn't even make any sense. This is what the show's about, is me talking. So with that, I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does weigh in on the comment. What am I talking about? Comment, and of course, I'm very appreciative for your support, Junebug. You've been around for an incredibly long time, like a decent amount of some of my supporters, and you've been supporting this channel an incredibly large amount over these past few months. And I've got to thank you so much for it once again, because it does mean a lot to me and Matthew, because it helps us to keep the lights on and keep everything running. So with that, I thank you once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have another question from Pakatang, who says, Enforcer, who are the Russian instigators, likely FSB, that led to the separation of the DPR and LPR?
I'm not really sure what led to that specific separation. I'm assuming that the Russians just wanted separate administrative regions for Luhansk and Donetsk. Maybe so that way when they're annexed into Russia, at least that was the principle at the time, they could just become oblasts, and they would already have the government infrastructure in place where the Russians could just kind of step in and start running them like oblasts, I'm assuming. But I don't really know a lot of information about why that split occurred. I don't know why they're not just one country. Like, you know, they say Novorossiya, which means New Russia. I don't know why that didn't happen. So it's a little interesting to me. Unfortunately, I don't have a specific answer to that. But it is interesting. I think I should try and look into that and get a little bit more information about it. And with that, we're on to the next question.
All right, and the next one is from Jose Kuroken, who says, Enforcer, about Ukrainian versus Russian battle footage, do you think we can get more and better vids from the Ukraine because personal cameras are a lot more accessible and they don't censor like Russia does?
I think that's possible. Could you reread the first part of that for me, Matthew? Because I think I missed it.
He says, Enforcer, about Ukrainian versus Russian battle footage, do you think we get more and better videos from the Ukraine because personal cameras are a lot more accessible?
Yes. To answer that question, that is mostly the reason why I show only Ukrainian camera footage, because the Russians don't really put out a lot of videos in the first place, and a lot of it's heavily doctored. The Ukrainians, pretty much all of them have some kind of phone or some kind of camera that's filming, and so they film a whole lot more than the Russians. And that's something I don't think a lot of haters understand. Well, not haters, some whiners, because, you know, there's people in this live chat that if I was working back at Greenwise, I would dread, because it's like they're detached from reality to a point. They just act like because they request something, it can happen. Like there's just people in the comments, very small amount. Let me say that in advance, very small amount. But they'll sit there and say something like, oh, why aren't you showing more Russian videos? The answer is I don't have Russian videos. There are almost no Russian videos. And so all of my videos are coming from the Ukrainian side because they make so many of them and they're uploaded to where I can find them. And so I do believe, yes, that is the case. The Ukrainians just have a lot more personal cameras, and so we get a lot more video footage from them than the Russians. Also, the Russians may be having a very bad time on the front line, and both sides vet the camera footage that goes out heavily. And so the Russians may be denying most people's privileges to upload their videos to the internet. So with that, I hope that does answer the question, at least in a way. And with that, we're moving on to the next one.
All right, unfortunately, we have two more live chat questions here. The next one is from Mick Ranger, who says, are you guys going to do a 24-hour marathon donation show in the future? I think it would be cool.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, but the answer to that is no. Of course, I'm in college, so work is due for some reason almost every single day in college. So sadly, I wouldn't be able to do that feasibly. it would be interesting. And on top of that, I don't really think I'd have the stamina to do that. And I also wouldn't have enough to cover for 24 hours. And that's another thing I don't like about modern news. And this goes for all news networks, is that they do 24-hour news. There's not enough news in the day to talk for 24 hours. And that's why a lot of them have filled up their channel with opinions and opinion pieces and so on. There's just literally just nothing to cover for 24 hours a day. You can get all of the concise information out about all the news in the world that's important, or any area for that matter, in about 2 hours or an hour and a half, and get it knocked out and just give the pertinent information, no opinions, it's just facts, and that's the end of it. And so I don't think I would be able to do a 24-hour fundraiser, because the channel's just not really geared in a way that that's possible, and also it would be a huge problem in my schedule. And so I hope that answers the question. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right. And our last live chat question of the night goes to Hoodoo, Texas, who says, is NATO actually assisting Ukraine, or is it more individual NATO member countries? Germany and the Swiss seem to have a lot of control.
First, Switzerland is not a member of NATO. They are a member of the United Nations, but they are not a member of NATO. And so they don't have any control over the process of what goes on in NATO. Germany doesn't have really a lot of control over what's going on in NATO either, because if they did, no supplies would be making it to Ukraine hardly, but we see loads of it making there. Mostly Scandinavian equipment, although Sweden, we're calling them Sweden, you know, you heard that right. They're not sending a large, well, they're sending a decent amount of equipment, but they're not a member of NATO. Norway is, and we've seen them send some M109s their way, and we've seen the British send Brimstones and Starstreaks and a couple of other systems to Ukraine, and we've seen the French send over some systems as well in the United States, and so on, and the Canadians, and you know, on so on and so on. NATO is not really operating where they all have to get approval from each other to send something on their own. They're all just doing whatever they can to send over what they feel is necessary. So to answer that question, it's really a piece-by-piece kind of thing, a nation-by-nation kind of situation, rather than a whole of NATO approach. And so with that, I hope that answers the question, and we've now run out of live chat questions for the night, and I think this is actually a great point to end the stream here, because it is almost 3 hours long, and I don't want to make this a marathon. So with that, I thank you all so much for watching. If you are new to this channel and you've sat through the question segment, you are a trooper for sure, and you must enjoy the content. So if you do, please make sure to hit the like button, and also subscribe, because these streams do run every single night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, covering the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine, and we also upload daily summaries showing some of the highlight videos of what's happened that day in the war. I thank you all so much once again for watching, and of course, it's been an honor for me to report the news to all of y'all. I'm very, I guess you could say, humbled that a lot of people find my channel to be worthy of watching every single night and getting their news of what's happened in the war in Ukraine. So with that, I thank you all so much once again, and I will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time for day 106 of the Ukraine war. Thank you all once again, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Good night, and take care.